special meeting of the Newport Beach City Council. May we have the roll call, please?
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Thank you. The agenda sets forth the closed session agenda, and now is the time for public comment on closed session items or any other public comment. Seeing none, we'll adjourn to closed session.
Okay.
It's a special meeting, I understand. I'd like to reconvene the November the 29th, 2011 special meeting of the Newport Beach City Council. May we have the roll call, please?
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
And do we have a closed session report?
We have no closed session report this evening.
All right, although it was not on the agenda, I think we should rise and do our Pledge of Allegiance, led by me. Please repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a special meeting of the City Council, so we are not including the ordinary things on the agenda like announcements. So we will go straight to the notice to the public.
The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones off or set them in the silent mode. Now is the time for public comments, and public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
Do we have any public comments on non-agenda items?
Mayor Henn and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I believe state law allows you to hold special meetings on 24 hours notice, so I Would like to thank you for making the agenda and the staff reports for this meeting available last Friday. That was very helpful to the public. I'd also like to thank you for this opportunity for general public comment, which I also think is not absolutely required by state law at a special meeting. That said, I gather one of the motivations for holding this meeting is to minimize the amount of substantial work you have to do during December. And I wanted to remind you once again of something that is a requirement of the law. Section 407 of our city charter says in no uncertain terms, quote, "The city council shall hold regular meetings at least twice each month," end of quote. I fully understand your reasons for not wanting to hold a single brief meeting in December, and I actually understand the previous city attorney's opinion that this line in the city charter really means that the council has to meet 2 times a month only when it's convenient to do so. I understand that opinion. I don't agree with it. When last I checked, December is a month like any other, and the direction in our charter to hold regular meetings at least twice each month is as clear as anything I can think of. Asking the city attorney to interpret the charter is not going to change what the words mean. You have the obvious remedy of asking the voters to change that sentence in the charter, but until you do that, our charter is what it is, and under Article 11, Sections 3 and 5 of the California Constitution, it is the law of the state. I personally have no present intention of suing you over this violation of the charter, but since all of you, elected and appointed, have taken a solemn oath to uphold California Constitution, I think when you have a plan to hold a single brief meeting in December, that should give you some pause. Thank you.
Thank you for your perseveration on that point. Are there any other public comments on non-agenda items?
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Ryan Sage. Councilman Daigle, you last week or at the previous meeting kindly commented on 2 events that were taking place at 4647 MacArthur Boulevard and the lacking of the permits for those events, and the city manager commented on those as well. I wanted to just follow up and take this opportunity to see if there had been any follow-up with the promoters or any action or movement on that. It does seem that they are publicly still promoting the event in the same capacity that came to my attention in the first place, so just to follow up.
I don't have any feedback for you at this time. I'm sorry.
All right, thanks.
Okay, do we have any other public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to current business. First item being the Information Technology 5-year strategic plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. For the public at home as well as for the folks in the audience, this is a reflection on some work that's been underway for several months now, starting with the Citizens Technology Task Force. I'm going to ask, this is going to be a presentation made by Rob Houston, Assistant to the City Manager, as well as Roy Hernandez with Third Wave, and then myself, and we'll welcome your comments. The presentation's not that long, but I think it gives you a good scope as to what the IT strategic plan looked like. And I know I see a couple of members of the committee in the audience. I thank them for being here. We welcome your comments, too, and your previous participation on that committee.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I'm delighted to bring to you tonight a report and presentation on the Information Technology Strategic Plan. This effort was in response to council initiative, specifically city leaders' vision, both yourself and the city manager, to set a goal for our city to be faster, smaller, and smarter as an organization. This is important going forward as we try to match our services and our efficiency footprint with the resources available. And a key facilitator to this goal is having a modern and efficient information technology infrastructure. So with that in mind, Council created the Citizen Technology Task Force. That group, as Dave mentioned, some of them in the audience tonight, they came up with a report in July of this year, of 2010, with some great recommendations on how to improve our city's IT infrastructure. And one of the key recommendations within that report is to have a 5-year IT strategic plan developed. With that in mind, tonight we're going to cover the findings from that report. We have our consultant on board to present that information and his recommendations. We're also going to give you an update on the current operations in our internal IT department and the changes we've been working on and actions to improve how we operate in this new world, as well as getting an implementation schedule and funding recommendations from our city manager. So with that, I'd like to hand things over and introduce our consultant, Roy Hernandez, from the Third Wave Consulting Group, who came on board in now 9 months ago, I believe, Roy,
Yes.
and has been a great help in trying to sort through and sift through all the information, and he'll present the IT strategic plan.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, Mayor, council members. We're going to walk you through the, okay, very good. Thank you. We're going to walk you through the findings and recommendations of the IT strategic plan, which are referred to as the ITSP. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to go through the goals here of the project. First and foremost was to develop a comprehensive plan for the city, including enterprise requirements as well as unique departmental applications. We also wanted to make sure that whatever investments are made into technology are based on sound financial fiscal principles. We also wanted to automate many of the work that's currently done manually, which is tedious, laborious, and time-consuming. And also we wanted to make sure that whatever technologies are procured in the next 5 years are done so through a lens that applies best practices. The objectives of the ITSP there was 4 key objectives. The first one was to enhance public access to information and services. An example of doing this is through the use of e-government and online services. To identify an optimum operating model for the IT organization. And there's today there's several different models that can be applied. There's what's called insourcing, which is your staff. Outsourcing, there's a whole different slew of opportunities there, and then hybrid. Also, we wanted to develop a citywide focus on IT. Something very common with municipalities is the fact that as IT systems evolve, they become departmentalized and they become siloed systems. So one of the objectives was to look at opportunities to get rid of that. And then again, the last thing was to ensure that any investments made in IT are fiscally sound and, in fact, are responsive to the needs of the city, including service delivery to the public. Some of the findings and recommendations I will outline here. By the way, I do have 3 key documents. I have the findings and recommendations, the implementation plan, and what we call the business process handbook. And there's a lot of information here, very, very useful and informative and detailed. And this happens to be one of the pages from this booklet. What we did is we held 32 workshops across the city. Many of them were departmental in nature. Others were enterprise-wide. And we had subject matter experts attend the workshops. We had a fantastic level of participation. These workshops, by the way, lasted 3 to 4 hours. So we were glad to see high levels of participation, obviously a lot of management support. We had 242 staff members participate. These process maps looked at a process and the challenges and solutions required to improve the business process as well as internal efficiencies. And this is kind of a list of some of the findings. The workshops identified 103 IT solutions. Now, not all of those made it into the final implementation plan because we went through a process of prioritizing those and determining which ones had the highest return on investment. But we did identify 103 IT solutions. We also identified 36 operational solutions and several management opportunities. The bottom line is that there's a significant opportunity for improving the financial operation of the city. We had, again, in these workshops, we identified $16 million worth of potential savings. And most importantly, perhaps, is the number of hours that are being spent by staff doing tedious, redundant, inefficient tasks. Again, we went through an exhaustive, and I mean that literally, not figuratively, an exhaustive analysis of the city and its operations. And again, we developed a number of documents. We have a 107-page findings and recommendations document, which is here. We also focused on doing a gap analysis to find out where the city is today and where it needs to be to become the world-class city that it is and should be from a technology standpoint. We also looked at ways that we focused heavily on identifying ways that we can improve customer service. And then again, the model that we use focuses on not just technology, but how technology can assist in the transformational process that the city has been going through for the last several years. So we looked at management, operational, and technology issues. In terms of findings, again, from a high level, what we uncovered is that the city of Newport Beach and its IT environment has been neglected for several years. Some examples here include outdated systems. The CAD, the 911 system, for example, is 19 years old. And in IT, that is 5 life periods. Yeah, I compared it actually to driving a car, a 1949 Buick in Cuba. 1949 Buicks are great in 1949, but not today. So this is one of the things. The financial systems, the document management system, were all fairly old. The other thing that we uncovered is a high degree of disconnected or siloed systems. And this is really a significant issue because what it prohibits is the effective use of the information, report generation, sharing of data. All those things are very difficult. And they do inhibit effective management decision-making. So disconnected, siloed systems are key, was a key finding. The other thing that we uncovered, and this is, again, historical, is the use of what we call shadow systems. And a shadow system is an application that at some point in time was developed by a staff person. Oftentimes, those people may not be here anymore. The systems may not be documented. They're typically difficult to support. They're time-consuming and costly. So shadow systems is another thing that we uncovered here at the city. And in a nutshell, to remedy some of these significant challenges, it's going to require some significant investment. However, doing so will literally leapfrog the city from where it is today to the city that it should be. Now, the ITSP implementation plan basically takes a whole new look at how the city's IT functions and organization should work. It literally will mean a new way of doing business, and not just with the IT organization, but for the departments, and even the way the public gets its products and services from the city. Okay? Now, one of the key objectives was to enhance public access to information. We're recommending a whole new focus on e-government, web-enabled applications, and online service delivery. And by the way, 15 years ago when we first started talking about the Internet, this was kind of like pie in the sky. Today, constituents expect to get online services. It's no longer pie in the sky, nice to have. It's the way everybody works today. Another key objective was to identify an operating model for the IT organization. And with regard to this particular objective, we recommend that a new approach be taken to information technologies, i.e., as a new system is procured or deployed, that an assessment be done to determine what is the right staffing model for that system. And I mentioned earlier in the objective slide that there are several models. There's insourcing, outsourcing, and hybrid models. Insourcing is the staff that you have today. And for example, in the city of Newport Beach, we found out that you have a somewhat lean IT staffing level, yet a very talented group of individuals with a very high satisfaction rating, which is really, really good. However, that may need to be augmented with outsourcing. Okay? Now, you might ask, why not outsource everything, which we did not recommend. Okay? And the reason for that is there's some applications that can be outsourced and others that can't. And a good example is shadow systems. Shadow systems are very difficult to outsource because the people that develop them may not be here, there may not be documentation for them, and so an outsourced entity would find it very difficult to support those applications. Okay? However, there are applications that should be outsourced. Okay? Today we have cloud computing, software as a service. Those are certainly things that can be looked at, should be looked at. Other examples include like a new CAD 911 system. Some options that are available there are to jointly operate those systems or get into partnerships with other agencies to leverage those investments, i.e., they provide the systems, you provide the staff, or you provide the staff and they provide the systems. So there's a number of outsourcing models that can be adopted. Some of them include contract staff to deal with peak demand periods. i.e. the implementation of an ERP, a financial system. Maybe you have a professional services contract to implement the system. When the system is completed, those staff go away. Okay. Another objective was to develop a citywide focus. What we're recommending is that the city adopt a formal IT governance structure and policies be put in place to ensure that whatever hardware and software is implemented meets a certain standard, an enterprise architecture, if you will, okay? So that you minimize or mitigate the proliferation of standalone silo systems or unsupported systems or shadow systems, okay? Another objective was to ensure that whatever investments are made in IT are fiscally sound. And again, the recommendation here that we're making is that whatever systems are slated to be procured go through a return on investment analysis. The 5-year implementation plan identified a number of projects. I'm not going to go through these in detail. Suffice it to say that we did identify infrastructure requirements, i.e. local area networks, wide area networks, fiber, et cetera, software, both at the department level and citywide applications, as well as e-government. So we came up with a very thorough list of applications and technologies that will enhance the way the city provides services to the public. Again, this is a lot of technology to put on the plate. We're recommending that these initiatives be spread out over 5 years and that they be phased in logical sequences, okay? With the sequencing determined by a prioritization of those initiatives. Okay? On this floor, we see the top 11 potential benefits that the ITSP will deliver to the city internally as well as to the public. And I'm not going to go through all these, but I would like to highlight the first 3. And these are and it's interesting because this data came directly from the surveys, the workshops, and focus groups that we had with city staff and management. And the first 3 deal with more efficient use of staff time, enhanced customer service, and cost savings. And those are certainly 3 things that any municipality would be interested in. And these are the things that in this particular environment, in this community, the ITSP will deliver. At the end of the project, one of the last deliverables that we did was to do a cost-benefit analysis on the potential return on investment of all the initiatives that made the final cut. And we went from 103 to 44. So not everything is included in the implementation plan, only those things that met the requirement of a good business case. But what we see here is an initial, a fairly significant investment in year 1, dropping down substantially in the following years. And then we see the benefits kind of growing at a constant level over the 5-year period. Okay. So what we basically concluded is that the 44 initiatives that we identified would cost about $13.18 million, and the potential savings would be slightly less than that over 5 years. Anything after that would be gravy. So it represents a fairly good business case. So in terms of, just to summarize the implementation benefits, improved business processes, reduced costs, better, faster customer service, and better financial information, which I understand that one and the right tools to support accurate performance-based budgeting are 2 key management objectives and benefits of the ITSP. So basically, just in conclusion, I'd like to say that Third Wave recommends that the city adopt and fund the IT strategic plan for the city of Newport Beach over the next 5 years. And I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Thank you, Roy. Earlier in this year, I was asked to take on the role of interim IT manager for the city, and over that time have been working with our IT staff to look at how we operate and look at some improvements for that. And so I'm going to give a quick update on some changes we're doing at the department level to try to meet some of the recommendations that our Citizen Task Force have uncovered, as well as recommendations already being implemented from the strategic plan. Let me go over some examples for you. First one was our city manager directed that the staff be centralized. We had a decentralized IT model with individual staff for IT working in the library, staff person working in the fire department, a group working for police department, and then another group working in the city hall complex. These groups all were serving departments, but there wasn't a citywide coordination. the task force identified this would be a great opportunity to centralize and coordinate. So we've been doing that this year and finding some great opportunities to work together, strategize together, and prioritize. We've also been doing a lot of research on best practices and trying to learn from others. I've had discussions with other cities, and they have different models. It's been interesting learning some of their benefits and drawbacks of different models. City of Brea, for instance, they actually have expanded their IT department to take on small cities, and they do their IT work on contract. City of Irvine has contracted out all their IT services. City of Mission Viejo has done a hybrid. City of Huntington Beach, I've spoken to them, and they've had in-house staff, but have done large reductions due to budget constraints, and they're learning how to prioritize. So we're trying to reach out to get new ways of operating from our neighbors, as well as talking to a lot of private firms that are consolidators of hardware, know how to build data centers efficiently, know how to virtualize and find efficiencies within systems. So we're having that as a priority within our organization now. We also have a staffing model that we're taking some of the recommendations Roy mentioned in the strategic plan, where we're keeping our staff lean. We do have a couple vacancies we haven't filled. We're looking at getting contractors in to do project work and trying to be efficient in that way. We've also got the beginnings of a common IT infrastructure standard. We're having meetings across our citywide group to start standardizing what we're going to do for our data centers, desktop software in the future, so we can get out of that siloed departmental model. And we are also, within the budget we currently have, trying to replace our old legacy systems. Council just last week actually approved the replacement of our Alchemy system that did our document imaging. We actually got that in 1998, so that one was only 13 years old, but really actually starting to fragment the lot of support required, not easy to use. So we're excited. It'll take a few months to get up and running, but our Laserfish system we think will be very user-friendly, web-enabled. Our citizens will be able to access our information. It's going to be a good change. And I also wanted to give an example of, we've just started upgrading our phone systems. We have analog phones. The state-of-the-art technology is voice over internet protocol. And so here's just a visual of a change we're making. So here's Yukon. He works in our IT department. He works so hard, he's looking tired right now, but he's trying his best. And we have here these two big cabinets beside him, our current analog phone system, which we got 20 years ago. Now, the change is just starting. We've just received the shipment of the new phones for our City Hall complex to go into the voice over internet protocol. And here's the servers that control all the systems right here. Those two little sleeves are two servers. Those two things will do more than all those boxes combined. And when we're done the changeover, we get rid of the two big boxes, and that's how we run our system. So I just thought it was an interesting visual of some of the technology changes. There's a whole bunch of features and coordination on our computers that the new systems will do. A couple more changes just to highlight is virtualization. That's a buzzword if you read anything about IT. We've got our servers already in the process of virtualizing. Just some quick stats is we used to have at our City Hall data center 42 physical servers. We've now virtualized them down to 26 virtual servers, and we actually have capacity with those 26 equivalent to 56 servers. So we've increased capacity, reduced hardware. So we're finding efficiencies there.
Virtual server, can you define that?
As best as I can. Yeah, virtual server is essentially a server that shares resources. So if you have 10 different pieces of software, in the past you'd run 10 different servers, but perhaps one of those pieces of software needs all the server space and the other ones don't, and there'd be spare resources sitting on the other servers. And when you virtualize them, they work as a bank of server space, and so all the software programs share the resource. If one needs more space, they share it. So you can you get rid of the extra capacity. Is that helpful? Okay. So the next step after that is looking at virtualizing our PCs that are on our desks. Our current model is every 4 years they have to be replaced. The new model is to get virtual desktops. They're thin client. They look kind of similar, but you can replace them once every 8 years. They're much easier to support. The software resides in central servers, not on everyone's computer, and it's a state-of-the-art plan, so we're looking at ramping that up shortly. Consolidating data centers. The city has 3 currently, but we're in the process of moving that down to 2. Our main library's data center, we're currently undergoing a change to merge it with our City Hall complex data center. And the 3rd data center is sitting at the police department. Due to Department of Justice security rules, we have a need to physically separate the data. So we believe the consolidation will be to 2 centers as far as we can go at this point. But at least 2 is better than 3. We've also got a priority list with our coordinated central planning, which has all of our department support groups working together to set the priorities. But we're building in time for research and development. Something our city manager Dave's asked is, what would Google do? Well, ideally, Google would give what they call 20% time to their system engineers, and they actually do provide 20% of their time to do research projects, whatever they want. We're not going to be quite that far in Google, but we are trying to set aside time built into people's schedules to do the research on the new system, so we're not falling behind. We're trying to be cutting edge. Examples of what we're doing in some of that research time is we're working with cloud applications, that cloud being services that are hosted outside of our city. This is now state-of-the-art. We've got our recreation online booking system for classes is in the cloud. Our spam filter is in the cloud. And we're testing some of our databases for GIS and permitting. We're doing tests on the Amazon public cloud, but we're at this point not switching anything over for sure because there's security issues that we're going to keep looking at. There has been a breach with the Amazon cloud with some of the information, and we want to make sure that the bugs have been worked out in that new model before we jump in, sort of trying to be cutting edge but not bleeding edge. At the library, they're looking at an RFID system to have radio frequency tags on books, so we're starting to work with them to identify the right technology if that is to be implemented. And we're working with the police department to do research to figure out if they are to get a new CAD RMS system, what would be the right fit for them. So this is just an example of putting research and development as a priority. With that, I'd like to hand things over to our city manager, Dave Kiff.
So I can see, I'll move over here. So the conclusions of the strategic plan involve what we do it and when and how much it might cost. So as Rob noticed, as Rob mentioned, we've got some progress going already, including with the Laserfiche and the voice over internet protocol phones. And phones will move over to the new City Hall. I made sure Rob answered that question in the affirmative, so we were using technology that will go over with us. And the Laserfiche, as Rob noted, that responds directly to some things council members have noted, including Councilmember Daigle, about better accessible documents. But it did say that significant investment is needed. These need to be prioritized with other city needs, as you folks well know. But to me and to the staff, this is a cost of doing business. It's like personnel cost, uniforms, trucks. If you don't have the right IT, you're not delivering service the right way. So it's pretty important that we have elements in there. So we'll be looking at this and presenting it back to you in the context of the fiscal year 2012-13 budget. And when we look at that, you know, to me, there are 2 priorities that were recommended: the CAD RMS system and the ERP, or the financing system. Those are both major, important priorities that if I could do them both at once, I would. So we'll be looking at ways to try and accomplish that. There's some intriguing ways of sharing those with our neighbors, especially the CAD RMS system. I don't know that it's the perfect solution, but it might be, significantly reducing those costs. I'm curious as to whether there's an ERP solution out there like that that might allow us to do that as well. So with that, our presentation is concluded, and we'd all welcome your questions or comments.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
Just a note, on page 2 of the report, it says that the RFP was issued in November 2011. I think you meant 2010, because that was awfully fast. With this, by consolidating just even the physical aspect of it, are we going to have more space in City Hall than we thought?
In the data center for the consolidation, it is possible. The data center is one room, and we'll have racks for, you know, battery racks and storage racks. But there is the potential that it could have some more room. It's hard to guess that we could save space, but we could use storage or other things in that room as space is provided.
Okay. And then on page 42, you have you lay out, well, 41 and 42, I guess, lay out the projection over 5 years. And if I were a resident, and I'd be looking at this, and I'd be going, oh, we have to wait till year 4 for a lot of our online things. And I didn't know whether this was because they just weren't considered priorities or whether because other things need to be in place before we can get to a lot of that. So I say I'm looking particularly at year 4.
Certainly, that's a very good point, and great you pointed that out. It's discussions we're having internally as well, because we want to make sure there are some, easy, low-hanging fruit wins for customer service, but a lot of them connect to our core financial systems, our permitting, our bill paying, and those systems are so sort of cobbled together and don't integrate in a lot of cases with, say, a web app or something on your smartphone. And so to
So
some
part
degree,
of it is just the
yeah, there will be some
the
possibility to
structures.
move it around. It doesn't, not to say we have to wait till year 3. There's some things we could move forward, but a lot of it links to that central core.
Okay, and then I noticed in year 2, it says e-government GOV public tablet computers. I didn't know what that meant. Everybody's going to have an iPad, or what that meant.
Maybe I'll refer to Roy. Roy was actually the builder of the specifics, so he can describe the scope of what that was intending.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this was a very thorough assessment of the requirements of the city, and the iPad specifically in that case, I'm sure everybody would love an iPad. Who doesn't? But in that particular case, what we determined is that there are certain management team members that do need that ability to have an iPad in the field. The city manager, anybody assessing, the city manager's office, in the police department, people that handle the public information officer might be in the need having to respond to an issue in the community, some sort of emergency, and it would be convenient to have the ability to get information on an iPad and then send information out like news releases. So we identified there was certain, and I think it's like half a dozen,
Okay.
6 or 7 people that we felt would be appropriate to have that technology
Okay.
based on their job.
And last question. No, I was still listening to you, and I forgot.
Okay, other comments? Councilman Selich?
Yeah, I'll ask my questions with a great deal of ignorance, I guess, because I'm not an IT expert. On page 44, you're showing it's one of the places you show the expenditures by year. Dave, are you going to be coming back and asking the council for $8.3 million in the next year's budget?
The short answer is no. That's too much. This is, I think, an optimal situation, and indeed, one of the elements, as I mentioned, that would be is I think, proposed in year 1 that it would be significantly less cost than that if we can do it differently, is the CAD and the RMS application. Again, potentially sharing that with other cities that need to purchase that as well. So of that list in year 1 on page 42. We can't accomplish all those things. That's certainly the guidance that Third Wave has proposed as a best-case solution, but we don't have that kind of room in the budget.
Okay. And then on the $8 to $12 million cost, what's the breakdown between software and hardware? Do we have any idea what that is?
Actually, we do have a spreadsheet. We don't have it in here, but I would probably guess it's about, to hardware and software? Was that the question? Yeah, I would say that 60% of it would be software and 40% hardware. And the reason for that primarily is that whenever you purchase software, particularly departmental or enterprise applications, there's normally a 19 to 23, 24% maintenance fee that goes with it. And that would apply to all major applications, so that the cost of software is going to outpace hardware easily.
Okay. And my last question really isn't a question, it's more of a comment, I guess, is that I guess when we embarked on this quest, if you will, I thought we would end up with more of an outsourced model that would be able to take advantage of going to some organization, that there would be large economies of scale and keeping current on latest developments so we never would fall behind like we're falling behind now. And something that certainly a larger organization that we could take advantages of their economies of scale would be able to do. and that we would have a more, I don't know how to say it, but a more aggressive or forward-thinking program as far as how we were dealing with our IT situation, and being in a position to take advantages of technology because it changes so fast. And it seems to me that this model might just kind of in a few years get us back in the same situation that we're in now, because we're not going to have the capability to stay current as much as we could if we were part of a larger entity, organization, if you will. And I just thought that we would, be taking a more aggressive approach on it, just because the technology just changes so fast, and things are moving so fast in this area, and not get caught in the area of falling behind. And then the other thing is that you've got this $8 to $12 million expenditure, and it would seem to me that if we were contracting more with an outside firm, that we would be able to have some kind of ability to spread the cost. We'd be able to get more faster service, a higher service level quicker, and not have to pay. We'd be able to spread the cost out in a more even manner. So we could get more service sooner and not have to pay the full cost, like here, under your optimal model, would have to come up with $8.3 million in the first year. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just kind of a suspicion that I have, and I guess I'll leave it at that for right now.
I think it's a good comment. I don't want to not respond to it. I don't know, Roy or Rob, if you have thoughts about that, because those are the same conversations we've had as this was being developed, as to what you can outsource and the benefits and disadvantages of the entirely outsourced model. You want to just comment briefly on that?
Yeah, I would, actually. What the findings in this report basically stipulate is that technology be leveraged to the fullest, okay? I would say to you that an assumption that the majority of everything that a city like this does is going to be outsourced is unrealistic, okay? However, having said that, this plan does take into account those opportunities for outsourcing and other models. And a good example, you mentioned the $8 million in year one. If the city, which is currently talking to several neighboring cities to share their CAD RMS system or the CAD 911 system, that would knock $4 million off that $8 million out of the gate. And so we have considered other models of sharing technology and outsourcing technology. So what we had to do in this report, our intent was not to paint a rosy picture. Our intent is to say, here's where you're at today, here's the gap analysis, and here's where you need to be. Now, here's what it's going to take to get there. How you get there, there's many different options. And we've articulated them. We didn't do it here, but they are articulated in the report. And one of them, for example, is the CAD system, which you're talking to Huntington Beach, Costa Mesa. And again, that would cut that $8 million in half. We also have had conversations as to what other outsourcing opportunities include. Help desk, education, training, office suite, all those things can be outsourced. But if you look at the total number for year one, if you look at the total number for all 5 years, two systems make up 60% of that cost, the financial system and the police system, right? So if you look at what's left, a lot of that can be outsourced, but the two big ticket items happen to be the two that are most needed, right? So I guess in response to your comment, we did take into account outsourcing strategies and options. They are documented and we've discussed them, and they have been and will be considered. But we need to put down the information, true total cost of ownership information, so that you have the right information for your decision-making process.
Along that line, one of the, if I understood you correctly, one of the points you made was shadow systems bad. But on the other hand, you're saying that one of the inhibitors to outsourcing more is that we need to manage our shadow systems. So you kind of confused me there. I mean, why wouldn't we get rid of the shadow systems and go to more standardized software?
Well, I apologize, because that's exactly what we're recommending. What we're recommending is to eliminate shadow systems. A lot of the hours that were calculated in efficiencies are because of those shadow systems, because your staff or staff here are taking data from one, rekeying it into another system, taking that out into a spreadsheet, so they can work up the report that you're asking, that the city council is asking for. So what this strategy says, and we didn't mention it here because we don't want to get too technical, But one of the recommendations that we make, kind of as a broad recommendation, is that the city adopt an enterprise architecture. Now, without getting real technical with you, what that means is not just standards, not just hardware and software, but an enterprise architecture today is a net-centric architecture, which means everything that the city has and operates should be web-enabled. And that's just not, that's not a flippant recommendation. What that actually means is if you have an enterprise architecture, which you don't have, by the way, it allows you to do outsourcing strategies and get rid of shadow systems. We recommend that the city eliminate shadow systems, but they can only be replaced as new systems come online. In other words, you can't just say, let's throw out all the shadow systems. I can tell you now, you would not be able to produce a budget. You can't. So you can't just toss them out. What you need to do is replace them. But that has to be done in a rational, planned out, prioritized manner. So we do, in fact, and I apologize for not making that point, but you're absolutely correct. The intent is to get rid of shadow systems and replace them with either enterprise applications or cloud computing. But we made that recommendation.
I'm going to follow up a little bit on this discussion. When, let's say there's an outsourcing company that would come in and manage our whole IT, their model, as I understand it, is, we'll provide the staffing and we'll make recommendations to you as to what software you purchase, and you have to purchase that separately outside of the company's contract with you for staffing. So it's not, as I understand it, it's not like if we outsource, those kinds of purchases go away. You don't hire a company that comes with its own software and its own people necessarily.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Sometimes you do, but typically you don't. And the reason you don't is most cities have kind of general requirements, like the Microsoft Office suite, email, spreadsheets, those kinds of things. But most cities have very unique requirements. This city, for example, is a good example of that. You are a city that has a police department, fire department, and you have lifeguards. Most cities don't have lifeguards. So to find an outsourcing company that has the baked-in capability and knowledge base to support lifeguards, I can tell you right now, there's only a few cities in the state that have that requirement. Most outsourcing companies don't even know what to do with that. So again, you have to be cautious. I would caution you to make the assumption that that you're just going to outsource everything. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but again, having said that, there's a lot of things that can be outsourced, and we've identified many of them in that report.
Councilman Hill.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to back up a little bit and say that I'm very pleased with the way the city has approached this, starting with the Citizens Advisory Group. I think tapping the tremendous resources that we have in the community to get some guidance on this from the very beginning was a very positive thing to have done. I really like the faster, smarter, smaller nomenclature. That resonates with me, although I'm not sure I see that repeated throughout in the report. I am concerned. I think moving in this direction is a very positive thing. It's not an option. It's something that we absolutely must do. I guess I would like to see, number one, although it was stated briefly, and I think it's obvious, that one of the priorities of those things we do first needs to be transportable 100%, so that we're not spending money on something and then not being able to transport it over to the new facilities. I think also that just as we have put together a very comprehensive 10-year facility master plan of a source and use of funds, I would like to see a source and use of funds for a 5-year master plan as we move forward with the IT strategy. It's given an overview, but the numbers don't quite add up by my way of thinking to show the benefit. I don't see the savings that I would like to see through the efficiencies and those types of things that are talked about in the aggregate numbers. And so I think it would be wise to break this down a little bit further as we've done the facility plan and look at it as to what we would implement. Do we have increased costs to support that implementation, and where do we make that up, and how in the end game we are faster, smaller, and smarter.
Councilmember Curry.
Well, first of all, I am also sort of pleased with the result that has flowed from the Citizens Technology Task Force. We formed the task force last year. This was precisely sort of where we wanted them to go. in terms of giving us ideas about how we move into the future. And I think building on the work that they did last year, I think this is a good starting point. And I frankly will be very interested in getting good reaction both from the task force members and from the consulting community and from the citizens about the ideas in here, because I think that we can build off of what is here from the feedback and the input that we get from others perhaps more technically inclined than I am as they review it. I think, first of all, I'm not necessarily, I think it's a large investment. I'm not necessarily scared by the investment. I do think that we can get significant economies by working in tandem with other jurisdictions for CAD systems. We do that now for our fire dispatch. I've been in my finance business. We financed those for other jurisdictions, and it worked very, very well. So I think that would be a top priority, as has been indicated. That substantially lowers the implementation cost of this going forward. I do think this needs to be baked into our budget. We need to bite the bullet, and we need to be serious about bringing ourselves into the 21st century. If anything, I want to see us do more in terms of outsourcing. I want to see us do more in terms of using cloud computing technologies, of using in-the-field technologies. I want to see us really leverage the resources that are out there in terms of the consultant community to make sure that not only are we bringing ourselves up to where today is, but we are flexible and nimble enough to be able to go, as technology advances, into the next stage after this without having to make another $16 million investment. Sure. So that it moves and we keep pace with technology perhaps much better than we've done in the past. So it's a good first step. I'm interested in seeing the reaction from the consultant community out there, and I think we need to commit ourselves as a council to a strategy of moving forward and bringing ourselves into modern times.
Mayor Pro Tem Gardner.
I just wanted to know that the new system that was recommended, was that tested against many of these new ideas?
Sorry, which new system specifically?
You were talking, the one that we just...
The Laserfish?
Yeah.
Laserfish document imaging?
Right. I mean, we're not spending some money on something that we're going to go a year from now, well, this just doesn't work in our new system.
No, it's like a...
It may be a very ignorant statement.
So say if we got an ERP system for our budget, then somehow the new Laserfish document imaging wouldn't. That's not likely. We went with a standard program that's used by thousands of organizations.
Okay.
So we specifically didn't take a sort of a one-of small shop version, because that can happen. This group, Laserfish headquarters in Long Beach, and their systems are in multiple cities just in Southern California. We went and checked out some. They integrate very well, so we're very confident that's not going to be a problem.
Okay, good. Well, I want to congratulate the consultants and the committee that worked on this, because what impressed me, I mean, a lot of it I just went, that's nice, whatever that means, but in terms of working it through the city, I thought that the emphasis on a sensitivity to the personnel, that's always very important. I like the fact that you have, resistance management?
Yeah, change management, yes.
I mean, because I think we do get resistance, all of it, well, not all of us, but some of us are very resistant to new technology or change of any kind. And it's something like this is built in, and that made me think that this is going to be, to work well. I'm with Councilman Curry. I very much support this. I think it's very important for our city. And yes, we do need to find the money.
Okay, I'll add a few. Oops. Councilmember Daigle, did you have something else?
Yeah, I had some initial comments. I mean, what do you envision as the computing environment in 5 years? Because you're asking for 5 years of investment. Actually, I think it's receive and file. I mean, is everyone going to have a tablet? How much are you going to integrate, fourth generation wireless communications? I mean, where are you really going with this? Because I don't think what we have today in the office environment is really what we're going to necessarily be seeing in 5 years. So can you speak to that?
That's the right question. That is the right. 5 years from today, where is the city of Newport Beach? And it may not be evident that the recommendation to move toward an e-government environment, e-government is your best protection against changing technology. Why? Because everything is going e-government. Everything will be. 15 years ago, I made a prediction that in 15 years, everything would be web-based, and my clients used to think I was weird. Okay, that was 15 years ago when the internet came out, 1995. In 5 years, everything will be web-enabled, Everything will be mobile. Everyone will have a tablet or a phone or some combination thereof, and that's the way business will be done. Your constituents will not come here to get services. You'll be you will be leaner, smaller, and smarter. Or what's the pull the Sarah Palin on you guys? Faster, smaller, smarter. In 5 years, you will be a smaller organization, and you will be more efficient, and you will provide better services. And the reason you will, internally, is because people will not be rekeying data from one system into another. The computers probably won't be here. The applications will be, they'll be out. The software that you use will not live in City Hall. It'll live somewhere else. Your constituents won't come here for services. Right now, the city's e-government maturity level is low. Okay, in 5 years, according to this plan, it would not be. You will be doing interactive, transactional applications over the internet, which will be directly tied into your financial systems, as Rob mentioned earlier. This will be a very, very different organization. It will be much more efficient. You'll be providing extraordinary level of services at a much reduced price. What we have here, I'm going to be very frank with you because that's one of my character flaws. What you have here is a perfect storm. You have a small city that has not made investments in a long, long time. Okay? 10, 15, almost 20 years. Okay? So you have deferred investment in technology. You have a very small IT department, which going back to downsizing, you don't. If you had 100 IT staff that could be reduced to 50, you'd see some real savings. But you have a very small IT staff that you basically can't get rid of anybody. They're so small, they do so much, they wear so many hats that there's no fat. I mean, we do projects like this all over the country. There are organizations that have a lot of fat. This organization, in general, does not. This is a very well-run city. Okay? So there's not a lot of fat to cut. There's no fat to cut. And you haven't invested in 15, 20 years. This is the perfect storm from an investment standpoint. Now, what does the future look like? It looks like that, a completely wireless, mobile, very efficient organization with a very happy community of businesses and residents and visitors. That's what it looks like.
Okay, well, that was certainly a rosy assessment of how we're going to be in 5 years. I've heard assessments like that before that didn't come true, though, and so we do have to be skeptical as we go along. I'm glad for the presentation tonight. It gave me a different view of this because I have to confess, upon first read of the IT strategic plan, I was disappointed. Mm-hmm. It was a very traditional blocking and tackling approach to, and it sort of came across as we're going to get better at doing things basically the way we've been doing them. That's how it came across. And it's clear from your presentation that we are challenging ourselves for new ways and new solutions, and I'm glad to see that. Typically, in an IT strategic plan, there's a discussion of the existing IT environment and the pluses and minuses and what can be done to make it better. There was a lot of hard work, there's no doubt about it, analyzing business processes. That's very important. That was excellent. And it's the way to go because it's the processes that you have to reform, and the hardware and software solutions really should follow, that process analysis. And so all of that's good, and I'm very happy that we are attacking this issue. I couldn't escape the feeling, though, that that it was still sort of mired in more of a traditional approach, and so I am very much in support of some of the comments made earlier about challenging ourselves for new solutions and new ways of doing things. One of the things that you've made a very good case for is that, in fact, we have underinvested and undermanaged our IT function, not to the extent of the people working there. Of course, they're working hard and doing good things. I agree with you on your assessment there. But we've got a lot of catch-up to do here. And one way to catch up faster at less financial penalty in the early phases is to consider outsourcing. I'm not so sure I agree with you that outsourcing in a broader scale is not a tenable solution here. There are different ways to outsource. You can outsource the management of the function, sure, and along with that, bring resource to execute change faster and level out the cost of executing change. Outsourcers do that all the time. They level out costs, spikes. And so I would hope that we would continue to reserve a lot of very thoughtful analysis of those kinds of solutions. Outsourcing doesn't have to be all or nothing. There can be outsourcing of very specific applications. And as long as you've got enterprise-wide protocols, software development standards, documentation standards, business case justification standards, all those things that are in your report, those are all good things that we certainly need and very clearly haven't had. We certainly need all of that, so that's good. I don't mean to discount that. But it just didn't come across in the report, at least, as well as your presentation did in terms of the focus on new solutions, virtual solutions, and so forth. And we're talking about incremental spending here in the range of $12 million. And I really, I saw the graph about the benefits. I'm very skeptical of benefits graphs like that. I understand this was a strategic approach and that there will have to be project-level financial justification for each major project that will get into the detail. But I'm just letting you know, I expect that we're going to have to see a good deal more detail in terms of cost and benefits. And I'm not just talking about something called efficiency that's worth $1 million a year. I'm talking about just exactly how that efficiency is in fact realized, those dollars. And so there's going to have to be some, more detailed, more green eye shade, work in support of some of these recommendations. I'm not surprised to see a recommendation for a new ERP. I'm certainly not surprised to see a recommendation for a new CAD RMS system for the police department. I participated with the Citizens IT group on the tours and whatnot, and I could see firsthand some of that. Your issue about shadow systems is, of course, accurate. But again, an outsourcer doesn't just come in and fire everybody. They typically come in and hire most everybody to keep things running while they figure out, how do we get from here up to here in a shorter period of time, the leapfrogging. So I'm very encouraging of continuing to be completely open to outsourcing and virtual solutions, all these terms that people throw around, cloud computing, remote resource, and so forth. So all of that's good. I did not see anything in here in terms of what you might call a change management plan. We're talking about some pretty significant, a new ARP system is a very fundamental, very time-consuming, and can be very difficult conversion. And it's not really that it's so difficult and time-consuming for the IT staff, it's the business staff, the departments that oftentimes take the big burden of a big system change like that. And so if we're going to get a presentation here on a new ERP system, I want to see the accompanying change management plan associated with that.
Well, we did make a recommendation about change management, and it may not have been in the implementation plan, but it is in the findings and recommendations. Did you read that document?
I read what was given to me, and I didn't see much by way of change management plan.
Yeah, in the findings and recommendations document, there is a recommendation that any major system have a change management component with it. Yeah. You may have missed it. We did not produce a change management plan. You normally do not in a strategic plan because when you have 44 IT initiatives, you'd have to develop 44 change management plans.
No, but I would ordinarily expect to see an overarching approach to how change as management is going to occur.
That is contained in the findings and recommendations document.
Okay, well,
it's the very last, in fact, I can tell you, it's the very last management recommendation in the findings and recommendations document.
But I think you make a good point, Mr. Mayor, about, especially with the ERP, we're looking at that as an opportunity to really change the way we approach multiple things, all the things that are involved in our budgeting and financial system, and we have to deliver that associated with that justification for that purchase.
Okay. I'll wrap up with one last thought, and it's the most critical thought in my mind, and that is we really are talking about recreation of an IT function out of whole cloth. We really haven't had an integrated strategic view of how to manage IT in the city. And to do that right, it takes an IT strategic leader. I don't believe we have that person. I know you've been working hard to fill in the interim, Rob, but I don't believe that's your calling. And I don't think we have that person here. And it really takes that person who understands the vision, takes true ownership of it, and really fights it through against all the buffeting of financial problems, issues that come up, ways to get knocked off balance, to get to the execution and manage all of the participation from the business that it takes to get to a good execution of this. And so I would be very anxious to see the filling of that IT strategic leader role. I know we took a crack at that, at hiring somebody, and it didn't work out. Maybe that's just as well, because now we have a much better roadmap here for what needs to be done.
Yep.
A heck of a lot of the blocking and tackling for that IT strategic leader has been done. That's a great advantage. But we really have to have that strategic leader in place. I would like to see that in place before we come with recommendations for big dollar spending and change in our environment, so that we can have some confidence that we're going to have the continuity of execution that is required to do this well. I don't, it may not be possible right now at this juncture for us to hire a full-time employee that fills that IT strategic leader role properly. These are not inexpensive people. And because we want somebody that's experienced and been through the bruises and the bumps of management, but also has that visionary approach to where we need to be, and that's a rare find. We may have to have an outsourced solution for that IT strategic leadership for now, for an interim period. I don't know what's the right answer, and I'm sure you'll figure it out, but we've really got to figure that out. So, in sum, while I may have been initially disappointed at what I read, I feel better about the discussion that we've had, and one thing that I feel great about is that we've identified the need that we have to do this. I have no doubt we are going to need more investment, so we do need to be prepared to do that. I just want to make sure we make those decisions best, at the outset. So, okay. Sorry, a lot of thoughts there, but I've been down this road before in corporate America, and I have made a bunch of mistakes that I'm hoping that the city can avoid. With that, we'd like to go to... Go ahead, Councilmember Selledge.
Just one more question, following up on Councilmember Daigle's question about 5 years down the road. What do you see a typical workstation looking like 5 years down the road? Are we talking about a tablet accessing the cloud? Or are we talking about a computer like we have now, but all the software on a server? What do you see?
No, software, in fact, you're doing that already. Rob mentioned that you're taking the Office suite and putting it on a server so that the software isn't residing on the PCs today. So you're already moving in that direction. And the industry and the world will move to that direction where applications are not hosted locally. They're hosted either on a server, if in fact you have them in-house, or somewhere else. That's what the future looks like. You won't have workstations. In fact, I can tell you right now, from an industry standpoint, the sales of desktop computers has been flat for about the last 12 months. In other words, there's been no growth in the purchase of desktop computers in the computer industry. The things that have gone up, though, are tablets. So we're not even talking 5 years. We're talking today. Software will not sit on your PC, and you probably won't have a PC. You can have a notebook or a tablet.
So if that's the model we're heading towards, then why is the hardware component so still at 40%? It would seem to me that the hardware component would drop off less.
Well, it does right now because of the fact that you do have really, unfortunately, CAD RMS systems require very rigorous hardware environments, as do financial systems. And that's, again, that lack of investment is caught up with you. It's caught up with the city. Again, now if you could find someone to outsource all of your CAD RMS function, and in fact, the city is in that discussion right now as we speak with several cities around here, that's going to cut a big part of that initial investment out. If you could find something similar for your financial systems, that would be the same thing there. I doubt that you'll find that today. By the way, we've been doing this for 25 years. We've done 100 IT strategic plans from cities with 100 to 15,000 people, counties with 14,000, 23,000 people. Okay? Our track record is one of transformation. I understand the tackling and blocking comment, but the fact is we've always been ahead of the curve. Third Wave has always been ahead of the curve in terms of where technology is going. When we recommend e-government, we literally mean adopt an e-government-centric environment. You don't have that today. And what that means is that you are not hosting everything here, just by definition. So that workstation of the future, it won't be a desktop. It's not even today. So it will change. Yeah.
Okay, shall we take public comment? Anyone
Well,
care?
thank you very much
Thank
for
you
your
very
time.
much.
Appreciate it.
Do we have anybody from the public that would like to comment on this? I know we got a couple of IT citizens task force. You guys just going to soak it in here? Okay. All right. Thank you. I do want to leave this on a properly positive note. There's been tremendous work done here. We're moving in the right direction. We got to keep going for sure. And so I applaud you on that. And I just hope we can, really get it aimed correctly here. So, thanks. Okay. We're on to the next agenda item, which is the Planning Commission appointment. And I'd like to start off the discussion on that, since I was the one that kind of started the issue last time around. And my concern the last time around may not have been as well articulated as it could have been. The initial report by the staff report by the city clerk identified a timeline using Council Policy A2 that, if followed in the ordinary course, would have resulted, estimated by the clerk anyway, to result in an appointment of the new planning commissioner who would have been in place for the first meeting of the Planning Commission in February, which I think is February 9th. And I was very concerned about that, as I did say the last time around, because of the Banning Ranch situation. Banning Ranch is a very large and complex EIR. I think the base report is something like 1,400 pages, very carefully intertwined and concerned with the city's general plan. And my concern was that we have as knowledgeable and experienced a person in place as possible, as soon as possible, in order to have a full complement at the Planning Commission to be considering that. And so that's what drove me to suggest an accelerated time frame. In retrospect, and now in light of the fact that our time frame was too accelerated for purposes of state law, it seems clear to me that all along we could have been pointed at a selection at the December 13th council meeting. And so I still feel that it's very important that we make that selection at the December 13th council meeting, recognizing that this is, after all, an interim appointment. What we're talking about doing is filling out the term of Charles Unsworth, so it's roughly through June 30th of next year, which should be enough time to get us through the Banning Ranch issue. And so with that as a background, I'd like to suggest, I'd like to move that we continue this item, but on the basis of waiving Council Policy A2, and extending the application deadline to Wednesday, December 7th, to give more interested parties time to apply, but also to provide for, at the meeting of December the 13th, nomination and selection of the candidate at that meeting. That move, that motion, would essentially allow more time for public input, scrutiny, and consideration, more time for applications, and comply with state law. And the only real change is that it eliminates the typical council policy A2 step of forming a council subcommittee which would go through an interview process, make recommendations to council, et cetera. And it is that interim step of process that I'd like to avoid and therefore eliminate by moving forward in the way that my motion describes. And so I wanted to clarify all that for purposes of my fellow council members as well as the public. And with that, that's my motion.
I'll second that.
All right.
With a comment, if I may.
Okay.
Yeah, I support what you're proposing, Mayor. I think it's important that we get a planning commissioner as soon as possible to fill this vacancy. In fact, I'd point out that many jurisdictions actually, when they have an unscheduled vacancy, actually make interim appointments to the end of the person's term and then go ahead and fill the position permanently through whatever their normal process for filling that position is. So it's not an unusual process by any means, although I don't think we've used it here much, if at all. But I think the circumstances that we have now really point to the fact that we should do that. The Banning Ranch project that you mentioned, there's going to be, as I understand, 2 significant study sessions during the month of January, which a lot of information is going to be discussed, and we should have a full planning commission certainly for that. As well is that I think any applicant that goes before the planning commission, to as much as we can do that, provide them with as full a planning commission to consider their applications as possible. And so I'm totally in support of your idea here and support your motion.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Gardner?
I'm still not convinced, but I do have a question as far as process. Usually, we have a subcommittee, and anywhere from 2 to 4 names are usually brought forward. We have 19 now, and we may have more than that. How do you anticipate this going, that we all write something down and we just keep going until we finally have 4 votes, or what? What would the process be?
My expectation is that the council members at that time could nominate candidates to be voted upon, and we'll go through the usual winnowing process if there are multiple candidates to come to a conclusion.
That would be a little scary if there weren't multiple candidates, I would think. Okay. So am I voting to continue this, or am I voting in some way of
You'd be voting to waive Council Policy A2 in regards to this particular appointment, and then you'd be voting to set the deadline of December 7th for the submission of applications, and then you're continuing basically the portion of the item that deals with nomination and appointment of the next planning commissioner to fill the unexpired term.
Other council comment? Oh, Councilmember Such, do you have anything? Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Mayor Hannon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosher. As I said at your last meeting, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Gardner. I don't see the urgency of the matter. I don't see the need for waiving your normal policy. The Banning Ranch thing seems to me to be somewhat of a red herring. Just as there were technical problems with the appointment process, the Banning Ranch EIR itself had technical problems, not the least of which was the state law for that required the notice to the public to clearly identify the major environmental impacts that project would have. The notice did not do that. It's possible that the EIR will have to be recirculated to correct the many. That's just one of many technical difficulties it had. So whether it will actually be coming back to a study session before the Planning Commission in January or not is questionable. Also, as to the motion saying the applications would be have a deadline of December 7th, the clerk's own report says the deadline would have to be at the very earliest, Friday, December 9th. So I think there's a problem with that. And the state law does require that the notice of the vacancy be available for 10 days, 10 working days, which is how she arrived at that. But there is a question of whether it has been even properly announced so far. The whole thing has not been handled terribly gracefully. Looking at the report here, I have nothing personally against Larry Tucker. I don't actually know the gentleman. But I see from handwritten page 51 of the staff report, his application was received last Tuesday at 12:37 in the afternoon. And at a little after 7 o'clock, we heard that there was no need to look any further, that this was an ideal nominee for the position. And that is exactly the kind of situation that the state law was enacted to avoid. Just as we have the Brown Act for open meeting policy, we have the so-called Maddie Act, which mandates statewide how appointments can be made to avoid spur-of-the-moment appointments of that sort. The findings of the state legislature of the Maddie Act recognize that the state of California has a vast and largely untapped reservoir of talent, and by denying access to information regarding vacancies, that you deny most citizens, and not only citizens, but also interest groups who may be outside of the city, the opportunity to nominate for consideration persons who, with particular strengths, backgrounds, experience, perspective, and talents that might contribute significantly to the efficient and representative policy development and administration of the local government. I think those are important considerations, and we shouldn't be casting them aside so easily. I don't doubt that there may be at the moment an announcement at the clerk's office saying the applications can be put in through December 9th. However, checking at 6:30 this afternoon, actually last Wednesday, the day after the suggestion was made to suspend the normal policy, a news flash did appear on the city's website saying this was a Thanksgiving Day weekend. As of noon Wednesday, they had until 5 o'clock yesterday to get their application in. That news flash disappeared this afternoon, so people are not, unless they go to the clerk's office and hunt out the fact that their applications are still being accepted, they would not be aware of that. And if they go through the city website, they'll find a stale announcement. It takes now a great deal of effort to find even where the announcement is, but it says applications. The deadline was 5 o'clock yesterday, so it's unclear to me that as today is a working day, that the public in general and interest groups know that there is a vacancy and applications are being accepted. I would strongly recommend that you stick with your normal policy, which would mean on December 13th, instead of making an appointment, you appoint your subcommittee, which will then review the applications and interview the people so that you have more than just the application, but know who you are voting on. At your second meeting in December, which is up to you whether you want to have a second meeting in December, that committee would produce 2 or more final nominees, and that in between then and your meeting in January, you as council members, according to your normal A2 procedure, have the opportunity to talk to those people individually and know who you would be voting on in the meeting in January. And I think the Banning Ranch EIR could certainly be postponed if it's necessary to have 7 council people on it at that time. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment on this?
Yes, council members, staff, my name is Laura Curran. I live in Corona Del Mar. So first of all, I'd like to just ask or comment that the Planning Commission, I believe, has 7 members, and with 6 can function with a quorum if the normal process is followed, if any items came up for review. I would also say that any qualified candidate and qualifications as part of A2 would probably be familiar with Banning Ranch. And I've read the EIR. It's interesting, but they probably would read it in advance. So I want to just talk a little bit about A2 because the staff report didn't really cover what A2 covers. And it's actually a long-standing policy in our city. It was originally A4, but starting in 1965, it was put into effect, and from what I can see, it was amended 22 times. It was amended, I think, 4 or 5 times between 1999 and 2002. So some of you may remember that, and there's been a lot of attention. So first of all, the report for Agenda Item 2 talks about 3 recommendations: waive the council policy, declare the Planning Commission vacancy, and appoint a new member. My first concern about the report is that this supplemental report only talks about the continuation of the appointment. So my first response was, oh, there is not going to be any consideration of waiving A2. It wasn't until I read it more closely and I talked with the city clerk's office, they said waiving A2 is still on the table. So let's talk about what we get with A2. So you are correct, it does include an ad hoc committee, but it also has other key provisions. For example, page 1, paragraph 5 says that within 20 days a notice must be posted. So in this case, on November 14th there was a resignation, and November 26th the notice was posted, so we're good. It also says a final appointment should not be made for 10 working days. With the continuation, we meet that threshold. It also states that the member can be appointed to serve a balance of the term if it's less than 1 year plus 4 years. So in every sense, this policy calls for a conservative approach, which is what we would call it in business, where you have maximum notice, maximum engagement. And waiving A2, especially without a public hearing, violates the spirit of these provisions. Further, provisions such as page 2, paragraph 2, advertising, calls for this to be at a regular public meeting. It's a 2-month period of advertising, which, with the council chooses, can be extended to 3 months. That's a conservative approach to allow for more time. Period established for the ad hoc appointments committee recommendation can be extended from 2 weeks to at least 4 weeks. Again, a preference for more time. Eligibility. No person shall be eligible for any board for more than 2 consecutive 4-year terms with an additional 1 year for early appointees who fill an unexpected vacancy. If you waive A2, that provision goes away. Page 2, last paragraph. When appointment is necessary, the mayor will appoint an ad hoc committee, which reviews applications, interview applicants, and at least 2 weeks prior, there's a full city council meeting at a regular public meeting where 2 or more candidates are recommended. In this case, since the list was presented in the staff report, 6 additional people have applied. Those people would not have the opportunity to participate in the process if the A2 were waived. Now, given what you've discussed in the dates, that would be the case, but with A2 waived, you don't have any guarantee, and the public doesn't have a guarantee. Finally, given the relative council membership, convening, that council membership's been pretty stable. In May, all of you would have had a chance, if you were a member of the ad hoc committee, to see who the candidates were that had applied. So an ad hoc committee could have been established, and people could have participated in that process because vacancies were filled last year when Jay Myers joined the committee. So again, A2 is important because it guarantees the public process and lets the public know how commission members are appointed. It's framed with an emphasis on conservative principles of management, such as regular meetings, time for advertising, extended notice, limits on terms of service, and council engagement. Waiver without a public review process violates the spirit of public commitment, which the council has shown, the commitment to comment, and the duty to open government. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Seeing none, bring it back to council. Councilmember Rosansky.
Yeah, I assume we're going to be going to the vote, and I'll just register my comments here. As I stated at the last meeting, I just don't feel that the process is fair to the public. We do have a council policy A2. In this case, I think it's especially important to follow our policy because it is such a critical appointment. I mean, this is a planning commissioner who will be studying probably one of the largest projects we're going to see ever again in the city here. Maybe the airport developments will be equally significant, but in any event, the process and the appointment should be beyond reproach as far as I'm concerned. And clearly, this was not a well thought out plan, whatever we did here. And I believe that the first planning commission hearing is what, the 5th of January? Is that? The 9th is a Monday. When is it? Kim, maybe you can enlighten us as to when your next planning commission meeting is.
We're scheduled for January 5th.
Okay, so it's the 5th, right, which is the only meeting before our next council meeting in January when we could follow our policy and appoint in a manner that's set forth in A2. So we're really only talking about pushing a study session one meeting here, not even a month. So again, I'll state that I don't see the need to expedite this process. The Banny Ranch project's been kicking around here for as long as I've been on city council. The most recent iteration for 3 or 4 years now. This EIR has been in process for well over 2 years, I think maybe 3 years. So another 2 weeks is not going to make any difference, and I just assume that we follow the procedure that we have set forth. It's a continuation of a precedent that has been set in the past by this council with other matters where we've decided that our process was not convenient for what I guess the council majority wanted to the path they wanted to pursue. So these policies are put in place for the protection of the public, and I'm in favor of that, and so I will be voting against this resolution.
Okay, Councilmember Daigle?
I also think that the policy was poorly packaged, and I think that the media story reflected really poorly on the city council, and that we really need to follow our policies. And there's just no justification to shortcut this. The outcome may be the same. I've seen a couple individuals in there that I've worked with in the past that would be outstanding, and I'm willing to support those individuals, but I think we need to have a process that serves the public.
Councilmember Curry.
Well, let's just be clear about what the practical impact of this so-called waiving the policy is. Right now we have 19 people, maybe we'll have 20 people that the council will get to pick from to appoint a planning commissioner, as opposed to following the policy where we appoint 2 or 3 council people who will shortlist that down to 2 people, and we'll have a choice of 2 people. So it seems to me that particularly for those of you who are interested in this appointment, you have a better chance of getting to the table and getting appointed and being considered by the council by this expedited plan that the mayor has presented, rather than by going through the policy whereby a committee is going to whittle the choice down to 2 and serve that up to the council as an either-or choice. Now, yes, we can amend their deal and add more people in, but that's seldom done, and it's really not a very productive way of doing it. So while we all get excited about these policies, let's really remember the practical impact of what actually happens in terms of their implementation.
Under that, we should just change the policy, obviously, because what we're doing now is far better than what the policy suggests. But we're not just doing the short-circuiting. We're also saying, okay, we have certain policies about reappointments, and we're throwing those out the window. We're just changing all the rules. I think it's unfortunate, and I agree with Councilman Rosansky that pushing one meeting or a study session is not going to make any difference in the long run. There's no rush.
Did you wish to make a comment, Councilmember Rush? Okay. All right. Do we have any other comments? Okay, please vote.
With Councilmember Rosansky, Mayor Pro Tem Gardner, and Councilmember Daigle voting no, the motion carries.
Okay. Moving on to item number 3, having to do with the Newport Beach Civic Center Park Project and the proposed pedestrian bridge.
Mayor and members of council, tonight we are bringing back the idea of adding the pedestrian bridge over San Miguel and to be incorporated into the Civic Center project. As you're aware, last February, when you approved the third phase of the GMP contract with CW Driver, there was an option to add this pedestrian bridge over San Miguel to connect the 2 pieces of the park. Due to your concerns about the cost at that time, you directed us to not include the alternative for the bridge and to wait and see how the project moved along and how we were doing with the contingency. So in consultation with our design team and our construction team and the building committee, we felt that it is the time to bring this back to you and let you maybe make the decision to either include it or to not include it. And I think the reason why we've done this is because of the economics involved. In talking with our construction folks, this is the time, if we were going to add it, it would be the most economical. So what I did is I put together some slides here kind of to remind everybody what this bridge is and where it is and what it looks like, and I'll also go through kind of the mechanics of the funding. So our folks from BCJ couldn't be with us here tonight, but they did send us these renderings. And you might have seen some of these before in previous presentations, but in order to kind of keep our design team costs down, we decided not to fly them down for this. But we did send these great renderings, and I'll do my best to describe them. This is looking south, like hovering over the dog park, looking down towards City Hall down here. So this bridge will, and this is San Miguel, this is MacArthur, and Avocado. So this is kind of an aerial view. This is another view, kind of looking from the dog park side of the park, across the bridge, looking at City Hall, and of course the horizon, the ocean beyond.
Steve, would that be as it would appear for an individual standing at the end of the bridge?
I guess if you were very tall.
That's what was my question.
It's up in the air a little bit.
30 feet tall to get that view?
Yeah, it's up in the air a little bit. I think.
Okay. Can we maybe rent the Great Park balloon for this, our park? You know?
Well, I think we have some photos to hopefully simulate the view from up there. Here's another rendering looking west. This is like we'd be looking from MacArthur. This is San Miguel, and of course the bridge going across. This is actually a good view to describe. It incorporates an elevator on this end, and also a stairway. So it's all ADA compatible. This side of the bridge actually dives into the grade. The grade is kind of rising here, going off the page, and it dives into that grade, so it's kind of a flat connection. But in order to make this be effective on the other side, we're required to have an elevator and a stairway.
So essentially, it's a level bridge. There's no grade.
Yes, it is. It's essentially level. There might be a little bit of a drop, but the idea is to just kind of be able to look out at the end. There's an overhang or a cantilever section and a little lookout area that gives you quite a nice view. And I'll hopefully be able to simulate that. Here's another view of it kind of from the other side with the dog park up here. You can see how the bridge kind of dives into the existing landform. So it's a nice connection there. And then, of course, the pathways that go into the rest of the park.
So is that area. Like a little view thing? Is the park that extends here?
Yeah, this cantilever portion is kind of meant to be kind of a view opportunity. And it is a pretty neat view, and I'll have some pictures here that I'd want to show you eventually. Here's another angle of it. They sent us every rendering they had, so we could get a good view of it. But here's kind of the view that could be at the end of that bridge. Although I think this is a little bit of a telephoto, so it's probably zoomed in a little too much. But it kind of gives you a feel for, you'll see most of the site. Here's the existing library. This is the area right now. If this was a more to-date picture, you'd see all the steel frame right here, right now. This mound, of course, is just temporary. It's the stockpile of the soil that we kept when we scraped this area down. We saved all the soil so we could reuse that later. But this area will be considerably flatter when it's completed, and you'll have a nice view of the park.
Is that one of the photos that was taken off of the scaffolding that was erected about where the new platform was?
Yeah, we had a scaffolding erected, and the driver was kind enough to put that together for us, which kind of simulated where this was. We thought it might be a good idea to kind of say, hey, for one, to observe the site, and the other was really to kind of give us a good feel for what would it really look like. And these are some of the pictures that came from there. This is kind of looking back the opposite direction across San Miguel. And this would be the area here where it would essentially dive into the grade. And again, there's a little extra dirt up here right now because we're stockpiling some dirt on that site as well. This one is a little dark. I'm trying to show the view looking south. This is the wetlands area here. Another one. We didn't get all the sunniest days, but a little better view of the wetlands area, and then Harbor View and Corona Del Mar off in the distance, and you can see the ocean. A little better picture of the wetlands here, a view of that area, and down here you see the library. There's MacArthur here, and of course the ocean off in the distance. So the idea would be that we came up with, working with CW Driver and our design team, they gave us the information that essentially prices have not gone up since we enacted the third phase of the project in February. So the price is really the same. It's $2 million. It's an all-in number. It includes all the management fees and what have you included to build that. So it's a finite $2 million number. Now, one of the things that's a little different here is at CW Driver and the city, we worked together to kind of propose a little different take on this. And the idea would be that we would fund half of it from the construction contingency that is currently within Driver's contract. And that's the contract. The total with essentially the three phases is now at $104 million. And that's the guaranteed maximum price contract. Within that number is also their construction contingency. So we're saying $1 million would come out of that contingency, and then the other matching $1 million would come out of the city's owner contingency, which is outside of the current GMP project. And just to give you an idea where those numbers are coming from, we can look at our contingencies to date. Within our GMP contract with Driver, there is a $2.7 million contingency. Now, that contingency is there for them to add items that are missing and what have you, but that is also the contingency that's incentivized for them to, if they save it, they preserve that contingency. At the end of the project, they will be entitled to 25% of whatever money is left, with the city getting 75% of those funds. So far to date, with all of the items that we've added, plus some credits, some substantial credits, the balance of the contingency used is $587,000, approximately 21% of the construction contingency, with a little over $2 million in balance at the current time. In our owner's contingency, it was originally set to be $2.6 million. And so far to date, the building committee has approved 2 change orders, one for some ADA ramp improvements that involve the ramp between the library addition to the Civic Green, and the other being a change in the dog park surface conditions. There was a portion in the center of the dog park that was originally slated to have like a bark type surface that was very loose. And as time went on and we did some further consultation, we found that maybe the preferred alternative would be decomposed granite. So the cost to add that, and I should have wrote these numbers on here, the ramp improvements were about $12,000, and the dog park surface revisions were $10,000. So the total was $23,000 and some change there, which represents less than 1% of the contingency used to date. So there's about $2.6 million balance in that contingency. And I can tell you that the building committee has been very stingy about using that, so they've been very firm, and we're trying to keep those costs down. So we feel like these two change orders were viable ones that were important to the project, so they were included. So essentially, what's left in the contingency is about $4.7 million. So what we're saying is we're proposing to take a portion of $1 million out of the construction contingency and $1 million out of the owner's contingency. And I wanted to add that one of the things, and I need to give CW Driver some credit here, because one of the things that by taking the $1 million out of the construction contingency, they're essentially giving up an opportunity to participate in those savings. So they're essentially foregoing $250,000 opportunity to make money if they would have preserved that $1 million. So I think they're doing that because they feel this is an important component in the project, and they also want to keep folks working. So to give you a little summary of where we're at, the first 4 entries there on this slide show the original contract, which was the basic conditions and general conditions, along with the mass grading and the shoring wall. Then we added the parking structure design build, and then last February we added the City Hall, the library addition, and the park improvements for a total of $104 million. What we're proposing is that if we add we're proposing to do an amendment to the GMP contract with Driver to add $1 million from our owner's contingency, which would increase the total balance of their project to $105 million. Now remember, the other $1 million is already in their project, so we're essentially just transferring it from the contingency into the actual work scope. So that reduces that remaining contingency. Hopefully we can preserve that as well. And just to be, open about what is coming up, I didn't want to, you might recall back when we approved Amendment 2, we mentioned that there were some costs that we hadn't qualified yet, and those involved some underground utility work that kind of came into play at the last minute, and we didn't have a number on that. We originally thought that was going to be somewhere around $200,000. We're now finding it's going to be a little under $140,000. And then the other item that we mentioned back in February was the signage. And the signage component, we tagged a number about $400,000, but we think we can beat that. And we're working diligently with our design consultant to try to reduce that substantially. I'm hoping to get that under $300,000. So with the bridge in, our new total would be $105 million and $800,000. And then I guess what I tried to show here in the next 2 lines is if we were to preserve everything that we have left in contingency, including the construction contingency and our owner's contingency, the best case that we would end up with is a $103 million project. So certainly I think it's probably overly optimistic to say we're going to save it all, but that's the range. Between 103 and 105.8 is going to be our range of total construction. And I think, as I said in the report, we've vetted most of this project. We're essentially built out $30 million, which is a quarter of the way. But the submittals and the requests for information, all of those are really in full gear. We're having lots of conversations with our design team and our construction team. There's a level of confidence that we feel we've gotten past. The big one was the excavation. We didn't know what we were going to find. We were fortunate. We didn't find really virtually any problems at all, with the exception of some utility issues that we had that came out of the construction contingency. The parking structure has gone very well. In fact, we've done some value engineering and saved considerable amounts of money. The building itself, we're at the point where we're all this. It's funny, when I wrote this report, we only had, I think, 4 bays, and then I had to revise it to say 5 bays. Well, I can tell you now that all 6 bays will have the steel up by this Friday. So the next step would be the steel for the council chambers. And in fact, we're going to be talking to you soon about doing a topping out party, perhaps in the second week of December. But I think we're in a good place with the steel. We've fully vetted our curtain wall discussions. Our contractor, CW Driver, and their subs, and our design team are starting to feel good about that we haven't really missed any big items. So we're feeling fairly confident that we won't have any big issues on the horizon. Now, that's not a guarantee that there won't be anything. There's always an opportunity for little things to come up, but I think we've vetted out the big things. And I also wanted to add that William Hahn from CW Driver is here tonight with us in case you have some questions, and I'll give him a kudo because I know he's not feeling too well, but he made it here anyway. So I think with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding the additional project.
Councilmember Selledge?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm probably the biggest supporter of this bridge, and the last time we discussed this, we continued it on a split vote. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through and, to the best I can, make the case for doing this bridge. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go back and do a little bit of historical perspective on this. When I first got on the council 6.5 years ago, the project here was a park next to the library. The city hall was being considered on the peninsula. There was a lot of discussion as to what should happen with both properties. At that point in time, we created two citizens committees, one that did the facilities plan and another that worked on site selection. And through that committee process, we decided to move our city hall to Newport Center. As we went through that process, I supported putting the city hall building on the 500 block and keeping the park and the library configuration the same as had already been approved. But when Measure B passed, I supported the decision of the voters, and I vowed to work towards making the city and the hall and the park, as it was called, the best possible facility that it could be. At that point, I was mayor. I went to the city manager and said to Homer at that time that we needed to create a citizen oversight committee of design professionals to deal with this project, and needed to create a design competition to get the best possible design. The city manager agreed with me. The council confirmed that, and we moved on into that process. And as we got through that process, the project had really morphed into something different than it was when I first got on the council, because we went from a park next to the library where, through a series of decisions that had occurred, we now had a park next to the library that had morphed into a city hall building, a parking structure to serve both the city hall and the library, a library expansion. We now had an expanded park with the parcel north of San Miguel. Later, an emergency operations center was added to the project, and then we entered into the agreement with the ACMA for a sculpture garden in our park. So what this did is it presented the opportunity to do these 5 projects as one and create not 5 individual projects, but really a true civic center that would combine governmental office uses with libraries, services, art, cultural, and recreational uses in a unique way. And it would not just become the home of government offices, but really a signature symbol of our city, and it would be hosting a myriad of civic activities and functions. Our Blue Ribbon Committee selected competitors. They judged their design. Councilman Hill was on that committee. An architect was selected, and the work of turning a conceptual vision into a plan and resultantly into the concrete and steel that we have out there now, that process began. And during this time, the building committee, our staff consultants, have worked tirelessly to value engineer a project that provides long-term quality at the most cost-effective pricing. As a result of this, very little of our contingency has been used. So tonight we're at a crossroads in this project. We have to decide whether to construct what I believe is a critical element of the project or not to construct it, and that's the pedestrian bridge across San Miguel. The project architect and landscape architect believe very strongly in constructing the bridge. As I said the last time we discussed this, I was wavering on the bridge, but I went to the presentation by Peter Walker at the library when he discussed this issue, and at the end of that presentation, I became convinced that we really needed to construct this bridge. And I would add that even the construction manager believes enough in this bridge to throw in some of their own money to see that it gets constructed. As do all these design professionals, I believe real strongly in constructing the bridge. I think it's a signature item that completes this project. Some have characterized it as a waste, and I'm sorry you said this, Mr. Mayor, but a bridge to nowhere. And I'd like to give you a few reasons, and hopefully I can change your mind along with some others here, why it is not a bridge to nowhere. First of all, the park is really one park. It just happens to be bisected by a major highway, San Miguel. Not connecting it by this bridge will, in the words of the landscape architect, forever condemn it to being two separate parks. So why is it one park? Some say it's two parks, even irrespective of that, and the bridge will not be used. Well, it's one park because we have there an almost 1 mile continuous pedestrian and jogging trail that is completed with the bridge connecting the two. As many know, walking is the #1 recreational activity in this country, and providing places for people to walk and jog in this community is, I believe, is very important. You go to Balboa Peninsula on the boardwalk, to Balboa Island. Those are very popular walking areas. They're used continuously. I can tell you Balboa Island is very crowded. I walk around it all the time. So to have another place where there's an opportunity for people to get out and walk and jog is really a great benefit to this community. In this park, by having the bridge connecting those trails together provides that. Crossing that intersection is very disruptive to whether you're jogging or walking or whatever. So having the bridge really helps connect the park, the two parts of the park, into one. It's one park because we have a planned sculpture garden there on both sides of San Miguel. If we expect the sculpture garden to achieve the potential that we have envisioned, we need to have a means for those that experience the sculptures in the park to circulate without crossing San Miguel at street level. If you look at the Olympic Sculpture Park in Seattle, which is probably one of the most renowned sculpture parks in the country, it's really a series of pedestrian bridges that connects 3 separate parcels together, and it allows them to function as one. And it is a proven commodity out in the marketplace that there is these pedestrian bridges, the sculptures, it all works as one. It would not work if it did not have the bridges connecting the different elements of the park. And also, if you think about it, because we do want to do a sculpture garden there, the bridge itself is actually a sculptural element. And Peter Walker convinced me of that in his discussions, because he talked about how in the design of his parks, many aspects of it have sculptural elements to it that becomes an integral part of the park. Now, it's also one park because we have different planting zones in the park, and those planting zones are best experienced by being able to cross San Miguel unimpeded by vehicular traffic. We have the wetlands area south of San Miguel. We have different plant communities, coastal sage, things of that nature south of San Miguel, but we also have plant communities north of San Miguel. And so again, having this bridge for people to go back and forth across the two areas of the park unimpeded by pedestrian signals and automobile traffic really helps the park function as a one park. If you look at it, if you look at parks all over the country, some of the great parks, and not the great park in Irvine, but other great parks, New York Central Park, for example, it's bisected by streets, but there's always pedestrian crossings for people to traverse unimpeded to different parts of the park by not having to cross streets. Even locally, if you look along Jeffrey Boulevard, the Jeffrey Trail Park in Irvine, that the city of Irvine invested significant dollars in creating pedestrian separations to connect the various portions of that park. Again, it has a trail in it and allows people to travel unimpeded to the different areas of the park without having to cross intersections. They saw the value of keeping that park experience unified. And as Steve pointed out, we have the viewing platform at the end of the bridge. It provides a spectacular view of the harbor and the ocean, which is going to be enjoyed by residents and visitors alike. In fact, I can see that being a place where a lot of people would take their families and friends, and a lot of photographs being taken off the end of that bridge. Now, in addition to the park function, this bridge serves an important traffic function. By removing the pedestrian phase from the traffic signal at Avocado and San Miguel, the efficiency of an already challenged intersection is improved. With the recent lane additions that we did, the street is getting to be almost as wide as it is long, and I don't think we can widen it much more. In a few years, as we see traffic increase and grow, the cost of the bridge will seem cheap compared to other traffic solutions we may be faced with to improve the efficiency of that intersection. It will be an opportunity for us to demonstrate the effectiveness of pedestrian bridges. I'm convinced that if we are to have the continued efficiency of our street system, we are going to have to incorporate pedestrian bridges at other critical intersections in the future. even if we don't build another square foot in our town, the rest of Orange County is going to grow, and the traffic is going to continue to come to Newport Beach. Unless we want to keep widening out intersections and creating 3- and 4-lane left turn pockets, I believe we're going to have to start looking at pedestrian bridges as the way to keep our intersections operating efficiently and still keeping them at somewhat of a human scale. This Civic Center is really going to be the most significant project this council does, in my opinion. It's going to be our legacy for future generations. I believe it will become one of the great symbols of our city. If we do our job right here, it's going to last 100 years or so. And when the time comes to do it, future generations will want to preserve it and not tear it down, such as Beverly Hills decided about 10 years ago with their city hall. It was a Beaux Arts structure, and it cost more to restore and preserve that building than it would have cost to tear it down, but it was such a beloved structure in the city decided to spend the money, keep it, and create an addition that was complementary to the original city hall. Now, this $2 million cost, it might seem a lot now, but it's only 2% of the project budget. And I want to point out the cost will come from bond funds earmarked for capital expenditures and not operational cost. One thing we need to consider is we're in a favorable construction environment. We'll never be able to get this bridge constructed for the price that we can get it constructed now, and particularly at the terms that we have with our construction manager. We're going to be able to get this at a significant savings over what it could ever be built at in the future. And speaking of the future, in my opinion, if we don't build it now, it probably will never get built. If this project has to stand alone and not be part of the overall vision that we're dealing with now, it probably will not be built. It will always, I think there will always be other priorities that will come over it. To build it now, I believe, is short-sighted. I think the city made a mistake 30-some years ago when we built the police facility, and we built it as a cheaper tilt-up building rather than a quality steel frame building, and now we're faced with a building that can't be expanded, it can't be modeled, we've got to tear it down. It was a very short-sighted decision by the city council to save money, and now this council, we have to pay that price because we have to figure out how to build a new police facility, which I think will on the way to solving that problem, but we would have necessarily had to face that if a different decision had been made 30-some years ago. I believe the bridge will be the capstone of our project. Along with the sail and the roof forms, it will be one of the signature elements of the Civic Center. It will be a testimony to the future generations of our commitment to make this Civic Center, this park, the best that it can be. I know that people question the cost and the use of this bridge, but I keep going back to the old automobile ad from back in the 30s for an expensive automobile, and it said, once the price is forgotten, the quality remains. And I believe that's what would happen here, is that in a few years, when this park is being used and we have a lot of people out there, people going back and forth across the street, this intersection functioning well, the idea of spending $2 million to build the bridge, the cost aspect is going to be long forgotten. So with that, I would just ask that the rest of this council support me and that we add this project, this bridge, into our Civic Center project. I think that 20 years from now, if we do, we'll all look back at pride on it and congratulate ourselves on the vision that we had in building it. And after we're gone, the people that will be there enjoying this park, enjoying the bridge, the sculpture garden, all the elements there, will be thankful for the vision that we had today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Do we have other comment?
Mr. Mayor, can you go back to put the picture of the bridge up there? Because I just want to see something. I don't remember what. Yeah. So, okay. So the way this bridge is going to function, if you're going northbound up Avocado, you're going to go either up the stairs and or the elevator, and then cross over the bridge, and then you're going to be at grade in the park. Correct. Okay. So anybody who's coming like south on Avocado, let's say, from the OCTA Center or whatever, they're still going to have to cross San Miguel or go up into the park take the bridge, take the elevator, and come down. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's hard to see here, but there's parking up here for the dog park, and if you were coming down this sidewalk, you could easily, there's a walkway that runs right about here. You could easily just veer off and take that.
You could, but you could also come down that other little path that you're showing there.
Yeah, I guess
across
you
the
could.
intersection. Okay. And if you're coming from, let's say, Fashion Island, let's say the medical office buildings, and you're going to the park, and you decide, okay, I'm going to cross Avocado and to the other side of San Miguel, so you'd have to go back up that path, cross over the bridge, come down the thing to avoid the intersection, right?
Well, you could cross on this side.
You could, but I'm just saying if you wanted to do that. Let's say they didn't. Let's say they just crossed Avocado, the lights the right way. I'm going to go across Avocado instead of San Miguel. So again, you're coming to the corner there, and you're crossing at grade. Would that be accurate?
Well, I think it's not necessary. Yeah, you could do it that way.
Unless you eliminated the crosswalk.
Yeah, we could eliminate that crosswalk.
Yeah, you could do that. You could eliminate the other crosswalk, too.
We would propose, if this bridge went in place, we would propose to eliminate this crosswalk so that anyone that did want to cross on the surface would have to cross on this side of the intersection.
Okay, and so if you did make the mistake and come down that path, you'd have to cross Avocado, cross San Miguel, and cross back over Avocado to get back to the City Hall side of the street.
Sure, but we could probably solve some of that with some wayfinding
Well,
signs.
okay, I guess I don't want to belabor the point here. The point here is, or that I'm trying to make, or at least, and I didn't even really think about it the last time we talked about it, I'm just kind of focusing on it now, is the bridge really only serves to take people from one side of Avocado, or one side of San Miguel, into that dog park. And, you know, I've heard all of what Ed said. You know, Don Webb would be proud of you with the history lesson you just gave us as far as the history of this park. So I applaud you, and I'm sure Don at home is smiling very happily. But the bottom line is, I said it before and I'll say it again. I don't see a lot of connectivity between the two parks. I don't see a lot of people walking back and forth. For the few people that will, yeah, they'll cross at San Miguel. We could eliminate the crosswalk anyway if you think it's going to be that big of a problem, and make them take the circuitous route and go across, just like the way you just described that other people are going to do it coming from the other direction. You know, we're talking about $2 million and coming out of contingencies, and it's great. We saved money. I'm proud of the fact that I serve on the building committee and that we have been stingy and we have saved money. That was the promise to the residents when we went into this, that, yeah, it's costing us a lot, but we're going to do whatever we can to save some money here. So we've managed to hopefully save $2 million and maybe some more, and now we're looking at spending it on something that I just don't feel, you know, for the dozen people who are going to cross the street there, we're going to build a $2 million bridge. And, yeah, you know, it's 2%. Well, 2% of a project, it's easy to play games with numbers and say, well, it's 2% of something. You know, yeah, it's only a 0.0001% of our national debt, but we have national debt, and it's a big number, and $2 million is a big number. In our first agenda presentation that we had tonight, we talked about something critical, I hear is critical to our city, improving our IT, but I think the city manager said we don't have enough money to do it. He's hoping to get it done over the next 5 years. Well, Dave, tell me, how could $2 million help you? Now, I understand it's in, you know, bond money, and that $2 million is probably not going to go into your IT project, but it's one pot of money out there. There's general fund money that's offset by this or that, or interest payments or whatever. And so, you know, if we're looking at critical expenses, I don't see this bridge as being a critical expense. I don't see it as being a significant architectural element unless you're going to spend a hell of a lot more money than what I see up there as far as trying to make it look like sculpture or art or whatever you want to call it. To me, it's a bridge. And in addition to the $2 million cost, you didn't really talk of anything about the maintenance of this bridge. I mean, I imagine we're going to have an elevator maintenance contract because this is an outdoor elevator. It's not even an indoor elevator, which is probably even more costly to maintain, I would imagine, than an elevator in a building. You're going to have painting, you know, or maintenance costs on the bridge. We'll have to worry about graffiti or things happening with the bridge, people hanging posters or protesting. Well, I don't want to talk about people jumping off. I'm hoping that no one's going to jump off the bridge. And then to claim that this is a view opportunity is really stretching it. If people want a view of the ocean, I would suggest two great places to go. The cliffs at Big Corona, and go down to Mike's district on the peninsula. You can see all the ocean you want, and you'll have a killer view, and it won't cost us $2 million to get it. And so, or you can go into the park. There's view opportunities in the park that we specifically preserve to have optimal viewing of the ocean or the horizon or whatever you want to call it. So, you know, I was against this project, or I voted against pursuing the bridge at our last meeting. After hearing the arguments, I'm even more against it, I guess. I just don't see where it's a useful thing here.
Really good job.
Sorry, you did. You really, I mean, I was wavering a little bit. I started to think about it after our last building committee meeting. I'm thinking, well, you know, this or that. But it's just to me, it's just a wasted spending of $2 million. In addition, and I've said this before, not even before our last vote, I've yet to see any type of pedestrian counts across that intersection. Have we done any pedestrian? Do we know even how many people are crossing there today? Has anybody done that? I haven't heard any numbers.
I don't think we have the numbers, but you can't really predict how many people are going to use it because
and
the
so
park
it's
isn't open.
speculation to say that there's going to be all throngs, of, you know, mobs of people crossing San Miguel trying to avoid or to screw up the intersection. So they're all going to jump onto this or walk up these stairs or take this elevator up and cross to the dog park. To, you know, I think I've made my point. I personally, I think it's a waste of money, and I'm going to make a motion to not move forward with the bridge.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Councilmember Selledge?
Yeah, I'll make a substitute motion to approve the staff recommendation.
I'll second that.
We have a second on the substitute motion. So the motion on the table is the substitute motion, then, to approve the bridge, all right, just to be clear. So, Councilmember Curry.
Public comment, too.
Well, I think I opposed this when it came before us the last time, and I was concerned about the cost. And like Councilman Selledge, I supported the City Hall in the 500 block of Newport Center Drive. And if we had stuck with that decision in 2007, tonight we would be having the meeting celebrating our second-year anniversary in the new City Hall, and this site would be well underway for redevelopment, and we'd have $50 million less debt. But the voters voted for Measure B, and that set the tone and wrote in the city's charter, since everybody's very concerned that we follow the rules, that City Hall be at this location. And when the voters made that choice, in my mind, like Councilman Selledge, it's our job to follow the will of the voters and not to do the job in a way that leaves us with 60 years' worth of regret when we're done. Now, that's one of the most impacted intersections in the city, at Avocado and San Miguel and at MacArthur. So to the extent that we're able to get improvement in terms of the pedestrian traffic flow there, to the extent that we're able to follow the visions of the architects that we hired, who put that bridge in there as an integral element of how the park is going to function, to the extent that we've identified savings through the construction of the park, or of the entire complex, in such a way that we're taking this out of our contingency plus what's being put in by the design-build contractor. And because there are bond proceeds that these are coming from, they can only be spent on capital projects anyway, although I understand we have other money that's flowing back and forth here. Yeah, it seems to me, now that we've documented, you know, I supported taking this out because we were not clear about what the ultimate cost was going to be, but now we're at a point where we're pretty confident, it sounds to me, about where the cost is going to come in, and that this can be afforded within the financing that's already been concluded, so there's no more financing to be done. Given that, and it's in Councilman Selledge's district, I think I'm going to defer to his judgment on this. I do believe it's going to be an important traffic enhancement to this entire neighborhood, and I think it fulfills the vision of the park as designed by the architects.
Councilmember Hill.
Well, since it's difficult to determine what Councilman Rosansky's position is on this, I think I'll chime in to the fact that I support the bridge. And I support the bridge, I think, for three what I would call broad categories. I won't attempt to repeat all of the comments made by Councilman Selledge, other than to say that that I think there are functional reasons, I think there are aesthetic reasons, and I think there are financial reasons to support the bridge. The most important functional reason that I see is that the city has spent a significant amount of money in improving San Miguel. And that was a commitment that we made, that the City Hall would not impact the traffic on San Miguel, that we would make the improvements necessary prior to occupancy of the project. We've met that requirement. If anybody's driven the streets and used our signals and recognized what happens when a pedestrian pushes a pedestrian button to that signal, we will have wasted our money in improving that intersection every time a pedestrian pushes that button, because it changes the length of stay at that signal and it will allow traffic to back up once again. So I think that's a tremendously important activity. Whether there's one person or 100 persons a day that cross that street, that bridge is inherently more safety, more of a safety aspect for a mother pushing a stroller or a senior out for a stroll than crossing on that, crossing that intersection. I happen to be at that intersection a couple times a day, and it is just not a safe place for pedestrians to be today. Undoubtedly, there will be more utilization, whatever that number will be when a park is placed there, and it will be less safe at that point in time. I think that from the aesthetic standpoint, we can argue over the quality of the aesthetics of the bridge. I still argue over the quality of the aesthetics of the City Hall. But I think that in fact that will be a favorite viewpoint, that people will come here to have their picture taken at that point. And I think that it not only offers a view of Newport Beach, it offers a fantastic view of the larger portion of the park and of the entire Civic Center complex. And I think we have the opportunity to do it, and do it without a budget augmentation. The budget was set. It can be done within the budget, and it can be done at the most economical dollars we'll ever be able to spend. And anybody that has built their own home, I'm certain at the end of the time wondered why they cut pennies at one point in time and didn't include that one extra thing, and now realize they can't do it or it's just not economically feasible. I think it's either now or never, and I support to do the bridge now.
Well, okay. Why don't we hear from the public, unless there are any other council comments?
Mayor, council members, Denise Oberman. I'm really pleased to learn that there is a $4.7 million plus amount remaining in the contingent funds on the part of the contractor and the owner reserve. The staff report indicates that the project, based on work authorized to date, has come in thus far at a total cost of $30.8 million, give or take, and then against a total cost of somewhere in the neighborhood of $103 to $108 million. What is the percent complete of the project from a task completion perspective? Is it the same pro rata, 28, 29% complete?
It's about 30% complete, right?
Okay, so there's, go ahead, sorry.
From a money perspective, it's right around 25%.
I see that.
But I think there is, I think all the major portions have been identified. I think that's where we're getting our I guess our feel for where we're at money-wise, and whether there will be extras or other costs down the road that need to be taken from the contingency.
So we're going to come in at a net $60 million in savings? Are we from a task complete, percent complete perspective, are we in the same place as the dollar percent complete? As a percent of the total?
Let me just
Yeah.
interject a moment,
Sure.
Denise. With public comment, it really isn't designed to be a give and take of question and
Understood.
answer. So if you would voice your questions, we'll make sure that they get answered.
That would be great, certainly. So to date, in any event, there's a significant amount of the project that remains yet to be completed, whatever that percent may be. So perhaps it's a bit premature to say, well, we don't need that contingent. So let's just go ahead and spend it on this bridge. The money's there, so we've got itchy fingers and let's spend it. Well, why? Let's wait and see whether it's there. Furthermore, maybe it makes sense for the council to consider a little bit of prudency in terms of the most effective deployment of these funds. If there is extra money building committee's worked hard to make sure that as low a cost as possible is spent. We applaud that. But maybe there's a better deployment for these funds, whether it's $4.7 million, whether it ends up being $14 million. The gentleman who was the IT consultant for the city made the point, and a very good point, that this city is a small city that is not continually reinvested, made incremental reinvestments in its improvement, whether it's IT, whether it's the sewers. We've got 70-year-old sewers that are not being replaced. You know, maybe there are better uses for deployment of the capital. So I would just ask that the council fulfill its responsibilities to the public. The residents did, in fact, vote for a new city hall or new civic center at this location at the value of about $60 million, not $104 million, give or take. So maybe there's a better use, and it makes sense to defer consideration of any additional expenditures until the project progresses to a point where it's maybe 80% plus complete. And I project that the cost of construction will still remain favorable at that time. Thank you.
Do we have other comment?
Good evening, Mayor. My name is George Schroeder, and I've been a 25-year resident. And when this issue first came back a few months ago, I had concerns about the cost. I think $2 million is a lot of money in these difficult financial times, and so I was concerned about the cost of the bridge, and then I also was concerned that the bridge was going to be used. I see bridges built in different locations across highways where there's like a corkscrew up the bridge, a corkscrew down, and then I see people jaywalking across the street not using the bridge. I was very pleased when I came here tonight to see the design of this bridge. My offices are in Fashion Island. I go through that intersection a lot. I am concerned about the cost, but I do think it is the right thing to build that bridge the way it is designed, because I think it is a good design that will be used. I think the crosswalk on that side of Avocado should be taken out. Anybody coming down South Avocado, they will learn to either go into the parking lot at the dog park and walk across the ramp, take the elevator down, or stay on the other side of Avocado. Most of the traffic comes down MacArthur, turns right onto San Miguel, then left onto Avocado. That intersection backs up. People come down in a hurry to turn left. If there's a green light, a green arrow, they try and catch that. To have people who will be using the park, we have no idea how much use it's going to get. To go by how, to say that there's going to be 12 people a day using it, I think is a unrealistic number. I expect there to be a lot of people using the park. It is, you know, it's a nice design. Just like Councilman Hill said, I think the most cost-effective thing is to build it now. I think if we don't build it down the road, there could be potential people injured crossing the street, and which we spent the money to build it now. So I will urge the other council members to rethink, because I do think it does make sense to move the project. Thank you.
Do we have other public comment?
Mayor Hannon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I wanted to thank the city staff for making available at the last moment the actual contract amendment that you're going to be voting on. It answered some questions I had, although it does not include the actual scope of services that you're going to approve, which is an attachment that's not there. And I also would like to thank them for, at the last minute, making available these visuals of what the bridge looks like that you will be voting on. But I agree very much with Councilman Rosansky, and I have a little bit of trouble visualizing people dropping off their dogs at our $7 million parking garage, walking through this park, taking the dogs up the elevator, across our $2 million bridge to our $6 million dog park. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I guess I'll try to visualize the dogs going up and down the elevator. What really bothers me about this, though, is the statement, call me cynical, but the statement in the staff report that CW Driver is offering to give up $250,000 of profit in order to gain $65,000 of management fees for a net gift to the city of $185,000. To a skeptical person, it makes one wonder what is in that for them. And the bigger question it raises to me is, unlike something that is transparently contracted for by the city, where we have city officials like Steve Badum who have filed their statements of economic interest and are prohibited from self-dealing and making the contracts, one wonders where was the bidding, the $2 million figure came from, what oversight do we have of that? I'm sure there's answers to all of that, but it's not self-evident to me. And I'm just a little bothered by that, whether we're actually getting a $2 million bridge or something that CW Driver somehow is going to make up this gift to the city with. And finally, regarding the point about Measure B and the obligation we have in the charter, it's kind of a very tangential issue. I did not vote for Measure B, but those on the council who have read the charter will realize that actually what it says is that the voters have asked us to commit to building not only the city hall, but also all administrative offices of the city to be located in this park, which to my view would include the police and fire administration. And I really have not heard if that's part of the plan or if we're going to plan to ask the voters to change the charter. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have a question before we take
Yes, I
more
do,
public comment?
Mayor Henn. Question for the Public Works Director. Within this contract, I also noticed that there's a lack of itemization. Is there some reason why this $2 million is not itemized?
Actually, it is itemized, and when we actually execute the agreement, there will be an attachment that is itemized. If you recall back when in February, when we originally brought the third phase, which included the City Hall building, and the library addition and the park, there was also an item in there that had bid items for the bridge. Mm-hmm. And so that information was in that package. And what we'll do is we'll reattach that package to this agreement. And I think if William has any additional information, these numbers are hard bid numbers. They're available for viewing. We can show whatever backup. Right. You know, so these are real numbers. These aren't just numbers we pulled out of the sky.
Well, I asked that because a member of the public pointed out to me today that we're essentially injecting $2 million of cash into this project from a contingency fund. A contingency is not really your budget. It's kind of your insurance policy. So we're injecting this $2 million, but it has not been itemized as to what those costs are. So I guess if you have that information, why would that have not been put in?
Oh, well, because the problem we ran up against was the timing, kind of getting back to the original discussion about meetings and meeting timing. The time to actually if we're going to include this, we need to know rather quickly, because Driver is about to start doing some extensive work in the park area. In order to build the foundations for the bridge economically, we would have to know one way or the other to move forward. Those numbers were presented, and I believe they were in the original package that was submitted to you at the February meeting, and we can certainly pull those out. I think the effort tonight was just to we wanted to get an indication of the direction that you wanted to go in, whether you wanted to include this bridge or not include this bridge. We weren't actually approving the amendment tonight, but we're directing staff and the mayor to execute an agreement after it was approved to form by the city attorney's office.
Okay. Unless there's any questions of CW Driver, I guess we can continue with public comment. Do we have any further public comment on this issue? All right, I'll bring it back to council then for consideration. The motion on the table is the substitute motion to approve the bridge. Go ahead, Councilmember Rosansky. Okay. I have a couple more questions. You know, the total hard construction project is $104 million, and we've spent roughly $30 million, or committed and spent roughly $30 million today. illuminate me a little more here by why you are confident that this contingency is not at risk in the remainder of the project.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I think wasn't a singular decision by myself. This is really a kind of a group discussion with our construction team and our design team. The process that we have right now, we work through what they call requests for information. There are submittals that are made. Just about all of the major submittals and requests for information have been submitted to the architect for clarification and or approval of products and those kinds of things. So a lot of the questions that generally get developed by the subcontractors during this process have been answered already, even though the construction hasn't started, say, for the curtain wall, the glass and the aluminum structure. That's the skin of the building. However, there have been extensive conversations about how that goes together, how it's waterproofed, how it all ties together seismically, attachment points, utilities, penetration points. All of these things have been vetted in advance of the actual construction. So there have been extensive conversations with the design team and the construction team about every component that's on that project. And so we're actually past the point where the steel is up. So that's kind of taken out of play. There have been no major issues with the steel. The next biggest thing is the curtain wall, and as I said, there's been extensive conversations regarding the curtain wall. The biggest thing, the concern for extra costs, is usually when you're digging in the ground. We didn't find anything. We didn't have any problems. We didn't have any architectural or archaeological issues, any groundwater issues, any issues with unknown. We had some minor rock problems with the shoring wall, but for the most part, the things that we were anticipating to run into, we didn't run into, and we were very fortunate. So I think it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think the vetting the whole process, looking at the plans, looking how it all comes together, the whole team is feeling very confident that we've addressed most of the major areas. Now, sure, there are a lot of little things that are out there, the mill work that goes on, some of the finish detailing. Yes, there are probably going to be little issues here and there, but nothing large on the horizon.
But so the glass and aluminum curtain walls, there's a lot of mechanical, electrical, interior walls, all of that.
All the operating, the HVAC systems, the electrical systems, the plumbing systems, most of that's been fully vetted by the design team and the construction team.
There's another risk, though, with the project, and that's a timing risk. I'd like to understand that a little better. Are we on time with the project?
I think we are on time with the project. I'll be honest, that there's always that glitch. Something doesn't arrive in time. We did have some issues with the steel, getting the steel submittals. Because the building is such an exposed structure, we had to make sure we got it right. So we did slow down a little bit, but I know drivers found ways to speed up the process. And I think right now they're in process of revising our schedule. And I think for the most part, we've addressed a lot of the areas. From my perspective, I think we're doing well on the schedule. But, I'm always concerned. I'm worried about things.
Let me ask the question a different way. Does the schedule as it presently stands show completion for move-in by the end of 2012, like I had understood it to be the case?
I think we're heading in that direction, yes.
That's a yes. The schedule says that.
Oh, it's a yes, yeah.
I mean, there's a schedule
somewhere. I can't guarantee it, like I can guarantee the Super Bowl or anything.
Yeah.
But
there's a schedule somewhere, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. And it shows completion by the end of 2012.
Right. There's always that.
So
chance
there's a risk against that we cannot control, and that's weather and acts of God. So suppose we have an extraordinarily wet winter. What does that do in terms of the risk of finishing on time?
It would certainly push the schedule out.
But there's some allowance in the schedule for weather now, is there not? And still complete on time? Yeah, it's already built in. Okay. But if there were a delay in the completion of the project, what's the magnitude of impact on the cost? Obviously, there's extended supervision cost and, you know, other things. And so, let's say there's a 2-month delay. What's the rough and tough, what's the impact on the cost of the
If the delay falls outside of the, what we would consider acceptable, I guess unforeseen, if it was unforeseen delay, if it was a weather delay, it's obviously something the driver can't control. If there might be some other factors involved, that's something that's outside of driver's control, then we would be forced to add on to their general conditions contract, which would add on to the costs. However, anything that's under their control is their issue. They have a guaranteed maximum price.
Okay.
They're supposed to deliver the project in that scheduled time frame. So
let's assume it's an act of God, and it's a 2-month delay. What's your rough and tough estimate on the impact of the cost of the project?
Well, first of all, thanks.
I'm assuming there's no damage to the building or any other such thing like that. So
Yeah,
it's
no.
just pure delay.
You've asked some very good questions, and these are all questions that we've already looked into and thought about. I'm sorry. I'm William Hahn, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, there's very good questions you've asked. We've considered all of that in this. As part of, you know, here's some of the skepticism and so forth. Part of doing this evaluation included all those things that you had just mentioned. Is what is, you know, what if there's a plethora of things out there that could just happen on a project, and if we hit the worst case scenario in every single one of them, could we absorb it? Yeah, maybe not, but do we really think that's a reality? No. So realistically, where we think we are, where we've planned, we've worked very well with obviously with the design team and city staff and the building committee on controlling the costs on the project. We're through, like Mr. Badham stated, where we think we're at a point of the project where we think there's an opportunity for big glitches. Obviously, one of those, as you brought up, is time. We've looked at that as well, and we would not have made this offer to the city council if we thought that that was something that was going to be a problem on the project.
So I know you're not feeling well, but I was sort of looking for a number by way of
2-month delay number.
A 2-month delay number?
Yeah.
At that point in time, for all of our GCs, at the completion of the project, we would have significantly less GCs that we have on the project now, but you could look at probably a couple $100,000. So, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars.
Not millions of dollars. Yeah, I don't have the exact figures in front of me. I'd have to go back and look at them again.
Okay.
But yeah, we're not talking something that if we're a 2-month delay, that we felt would significantly eat that up.
Steve, did you want to add to that? Or?
Well, I just was going to say that I think the general conditions for the entire project, which is what we figured was it 30 months originally, or is it 24?
I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, so the number for overall for the whole project is $7 million.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you can almost kind of divide that up. But as William says, at the end of the job, there's less folks on board. There's less people to pay.
Presumably it's 80 or 90% complete at that point or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I want to come back to this issue of, you know, if we decided to wait because we were concerned about the still potential for exposure on the cost of the project, I guess I'd like some feeling for, well, what's the penalty that we're looking at here? Why can't we, for example, design and construct today, if we didn't go forward with the bridge, why can't we, set up the landing pad there for it, where the foundation for the elevator would be, and do the grading, get it all set up, so that all you got to do is, I realize this is a simplification, but just kind of plop a bridge in place there.
It's a big helicopter.
Yeah, just take a helicopter and drop it down. So why can't we do that? And for example, wait until August or September to decide to build the bridge? what are the costs and other difficulties associated with doing that?
Actually, that's a very good question. There's two issues related
Thanks,
to that.
I'm 2 for 2.
Yeah. One is, we're at a point in the project right now that we can get this portion of the project done by the completion date. So the amount of shop drawings, the procurement process on the project takes several months. And so that portion needs some time. Secondly, if we do not go, if the City Council decides at a later date not to go forward with this, it means that that whole portion of the North Park has to be regraded and redone, and there's potentially additional costs that are going to be associated with it. Right now, we're doing a lot of the work in the parks right now, and so we're grading them and putting in the retaining walls and so forth to meet the current plan, which does not include the bridge. But I can change that now, and we can go forward with the bridge, and we can go back to the previous plan, which was what was originally, I mean, the bridge was always supposed to be part of this project. At the 11th hour, when we started getting into budget constraints before the Phase 3 portion of the project, it was made an alternate. And so the architects developed another plan that if we did not put the bridge forward, how would the project look? And so all of that work is getting to the point where I need to start all that work now in order to meet the completion date of the project. And if I pass that window that I have right now, now we're looking at additional costs to go ahead and include it into the project.
So if we waited 6 or 7 months, the additional cost to then go ahead and build the bridge, which would include tearing out what you put in, whatever
that's
that
exactly
is,
it.
and regrading, and I suppose rebidding the costs.
Yes.
I suppose at that point you'd probably have to rebid the costs.
Yes.
Is it $1 million cost risk, $500,000?
I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it would be above what we have now. That's for sure. So.
And I think not being able to stay within the current, if we started building it now, it would stay in the same time zone, the same schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So if it goes beyond the schedule, then we have to pay driver to hang around and manage that project and complete it. So there's some costs in there as well. So we could quantify those. The hard part, though, is the prices. If the economy starts turning around and say in 6 months and steel prices start creeping up again, it'll change the cost of that structure itself. It depends if there more work starts happening. The subcontractors that were originally engaged to do it might get work other places, and they might decide to decline or pull out of the project. So we're kind of, hate to use that term, the perfect storm, but we have people that want to work, they want to move forward, the prices are right. It's all kind of pointing to if we want to do it, we should probably pull the trigger now. We could wait, but I will have to say it will cost us more money, and we don't have that number with us tonight, but it definitely will go up.
Hundreds of thousands?
In both, there would be additional construction costs, and then like Mr. Bader said, there would be additional time for us to be out there to manage the process.
Yeah. So. It could be hundreds, yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Rosansky?
But we're going to pay you to manage the process anyway, even though you're giving up the $250, we're still paying you the $65,000 to manage the contract, that portion of the contract?
Well,
we're paying $65,000 for construction management on a $2 million bridge. Is that accurate?
But it's within the $2 million price.
It's all part of the $2 million.
It's all in.
It's all in.
I understand that. Well, whatever. We're still paying for construction. If we don't spend the $2 million, you're going to make $65,000 less. Granted, you'll make the $250, but we're going to pay you less construction management than we would have if we put the bridge in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? So we're going to pay somebody to manage the construction of a bridge, whether it's now or
but yeah, it's getting thrown in with my management team to do the whole thing right now, as opposed to later.
So,
but they're also foregoing a potential participation in the savings later.
I understand.
It seems to me that the net cost difference is between $1,750,000 and whatever it would cost you to build it at a later date, which presumably would be above $2 million. right?
Well, it's not $1,750,000 because you got to add back the 65,000, so it's
All right,
$1,815,000.
$1,800,000. $1,800,000, okay, let's round the numbers. It's $1,800,000 roughly compared to $2 million plus,
Yes.
right, to do it later, because you're
I think-
going to have to tear out work that's been done, do regrading, et cetera.
I think that's a fair statement.
That's all I'm trying to get to,
Yeah.
just some sense of the difference.
No, it's a fair statement.
Did you have something else?
Yeah, I'd just like to address a few of the other things I've heard here. As far as the contingency, and Mike, I know you listed a lot of things about the contingency. I mean, we've talked a lot about the contingency and the fact that we've been very frugal and that there hasn't been a lot of changes. But the contingency is for contingent events. It's not, the idea is to not just throw extra money on it, and if we have it at the end, well, let's just spend it anyway. The idea is to have the contingency in case there are things that we don't foresee. And to me, preserving the contingency is not the issue here. It's whether we're getting $2 million of value by building the bridge. And again, for the reasons I stated before, I just don't, I mean, we're going to get some value out of it, but I think the $2 million, if we have $2 million extra to spend somewhere, whether it's on capital projects, which we have another couple of $100 million of capital projects to be built after this city hall is done, certainly the money could be better spent there. That's 1% of the next $200 million of projects, if you want to talk about percentages. You know, as far as safety goes, I mean, do we have any data on what the accident history is now? Are pedestrians being killed in that intersection? Have we been sued? I know you're a new city attorney, but you were here before. Are you aware of any lawsuits where people have been injured? Have been any police reports that people are being injured at that intersection, crossing it today, with the understanding that there may be more people crossing it now with the increased activity there? So we haven't heard any evidence of that. So again, it's, you know, the whole thing is like circumstantial. Well, yeah, we're going to have more people, maybe, but we don't know how many people we even have now. We're going to have more accidents, maybe, but, or people getting injured, but we don't really know how many people are injured today. We talked about the vision. I know several of you, Russ, talked about the vision of the architect, the vision of the contractor, the vision of everybody here. But, you know, the architect had a lot of visions here that we value engineered out. How much were I think it was the water fountains in the park that you folks discovered and eliminated? There was some Italian $13,000 water fountain or something.
Drinking fountains. That's
Drinking fountains.
Yes.
Sorry, drinking fountains.
Drinking fountains.
Luckily, you never heard about it. It was taken care of. They had a lot of visions, the landscape architect and the architect, that we decided that, you know, yeah, you could have all the vision you want if you have an unlimited budget. I mean, we could gold plate this thing. We could put solar on the roof, which we could spend $2 million on and save some money.
That's why you hired us to control that.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's why you hired us to control
Exactly. That's why we hired you. I mean, you did a great job, and now I don't want to fritter the money away on something that I think is just not necessary. So as far as the vision of the architect goes, like I said, they had a lot of visions, a lot of expensive visions. We've pared those back. This was one of them as well, at least in my opinion. So I don't put much, I think the architect did, despite what Rush thinks, I think it's going to be an iconic building. It's going to be a beautiful city hall the way it is and the way it's presently planned. And I don't see the need to spend $2 million more on a bridge that's, I don't believe, is going to be used. And again, if we have $2 million, Ed's talking about this wonderful sculpture garden. Well, we don't even have one piece of sculpture to go in that sculpture garden. Why don't we blow $2 million on some decent sculpture and really build a fantastic sculpture garden out there? $2 million would buy us probably 10 pieces of art to stick in that park. Instead, we're going to go scratch around and try and get people to donate art. And so, you know, you talk about a vision. That's my vision. So let's blow $2 million on art in the park.
It would afford an entire presidential gallery.
We could have, how many presidents have we had? We could have a statue for everybody out there. Keith, I'm sure, would apply, at least the Republican ones. Okay.
He's got one.
Yeah, we got one. It's a little bent on the bottom, but I'm sure we could get Driver to hammer it out for us.
We could probably get a discount on that.
But that's what I'm saying. If you got $2 million, there's way better money to spend. Again, Ed's talking about a 1-mile jogging trail. I don't know exactly what that is, or walking and jogging trail. But again, if we have $2 million to blow, I can think of a lot of places in town where we can blow $2 million on improving jogging and recreational opportunities for people who want to get exercise. I don't see people coming down to this park bypassing 10 other parks to come over here and try and jog a mile somewhere in that park. And if they do, they can do 2 loops around the lower park, or they can run up and down the dog park, I guess. or they can cross the street just like everybody else does and do their 1 mile. And if you're talking about the intersection, you're talking about traffic, and you're talking about slowing down San Miguel, well, if your plan is to close the pedestrian access anyway, then just do it now and just make people walk around. If that's the plan, we do it in other parts of the city where we don't have 4 street crosswalks. There's one at Prospect and Coast Highway right now that is like that. You can't cross on one side of the street, and people do it anyway. And so what you're going to create by putting no crosswalk there is a situation where people are just going to run across because they don't want to go up the bridge. And so my personal feeling is you're going to make it less safe, not even more safe, by eliminating the crosswalk, because you put the temptation there now for people to do that instead of taking the bridge. And lastly, if there are still 4 people here thinking about wanting the bridge, and kind of backing up a little bit about what Mike was getting at about timing, this project, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can engineer the project, like Mike said, to create a pad or do whatever needs to be done now to make it less painful down the road if we do want to add this bridge in. So my recommendation would be to at least wait and see what the use levels of the park are, what type of use of this crossing is claimed of San Miguel. And if it does seem to be burdensome, well, we have put in the infrastructure to put in a bridge, maybe not at $1.8 million or $1.815 or $1.750 today. Maybe it'll cost a couple $100,000 more down the road. But I'd much rather wait and see and make sure that we're wisely spending $2 million than just blow $2 million when the $2 million can clearly be spent on a whole laundry list of things that I just talked about. So again, I'll reiterate, I think that's, if anything, it's premature, and at best it's premature, and at worst it's just a $2 million waste of money.
If I say anything, are you going to want to talk again? I might. Oh, well, at that risk, I'll say a few things. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I'd have to remind folks that I was one of the ones that voted against putting City Hall in the park to start with. We would have had a substantially less expensive project than we do today, for sure. But, like Ed, I'm going along with the will of the voters. As it relates to criticizing any particular part of this project, as it relates to whether we're getting value, I sort of view that as watching a football game and looking at a play near the end of the game where the quarterback, who's played a brilliant game up until that point, throws an interception and somebody runs it back for 6 points and they lose the game. And it's easy to point to that quarterback and say, you lost the game for us. And if you hadn't done that, we would have won, and when the quarterback otherwise played a brilliant game. In this case, singling out this bridge because it happens to come last as something that we're not getting value for. There's other parts of this project that I'm not sure that I would say we got value for. I didn't want to build a community center here because I didn't think we needed it. And yet, we went ahead and we voted to do that. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to focus at the very last here on just one element of this as being something that's not for value. I don't. We all have an opinion about the aesthetics and whether the bridge is designed to be pretty or not. I'm not, I don't want to go there with that. I'm the person also that labeled this the bridge to nowhere. I remember that. Things have changed a little in my mind since then from the standpoint of the improvements made on San Miguel to improve the traffic there. And I think, really, honestly, they've worked, that the traffic really does move better on San Miguel through that intersection with the widening and with the traffic timing, the signalization, and the photo cameras that we've done, and the whole works. It really does work better. And I'm not convinced that waiting and seeing if the bridge would get used or the intersection would get crossing activity, I just don't, I don't think, I'm not sure that's a valid test. We're really not going to get an answer to that. If we don't build the bridge, obviously, of course, there's not going to be as much traffic going across that intersection, waiting for a light, mothers with children, parents of dogs that want to get across, whatever it might be, there will be less of that because we didn't build the bridge. And so I can't say what the answer to that is, and I don't think it's really valid to try and speculate on that basis. All in all, I guess I'd have to say I've changed my mind about this bridge, and I'm going to support it on the basis that it completes the design that was originally envisioned. And I think it's, all in all, in consideration of the entire project, which we have now and which isn't going to change, and all the other parts of which that I might have argued with along the way, and did in some cases, that are still getting built, we'll just have to consider it part of the package. The other thing that we've got going here is a complete West Side Facilities Strategic Plan that I think will yield other opportunities to extract value and produce value for the city that we did not foresee a year or so ago when we had this last discussion. So when I think about it, all points combined, I'm going to support the bridge. Do we have any other comment? Let's vote.
With Council Members Rosansky, Mayor Pro Tem Gardner, and Council Member Daigle voting no, the substitute motion carries.
Okay, that's the last agenda item. I believe we are adjourned.